E aku nui aku rahi, ki aku whakatamarahi ki te rangi, ki aku whakataitei ki te whenua. Tēnei rā te mihi ki a koutou, hara mai rā ki te kaupapa o te rā. Nau mai piki mai haere mai. Nau mai piki mai haere mai ki te whanganui ātara. Nau mai piki mai haere mai ki a pōneke. Nau mai haere mai ki Aotearoa. Ko tau rā i haere mai rā i ahi te reiria, tēnei rā te reo pōhiri, tēnei te reo mahana ki a koutou kua tā mai i tēnei rā. E te minita tēnā koe. Koa ngā ngāka kite atu i a koe anō, nō reira nau mai, piki mai, haere mai. Ko tau rā, i rungi tēnei tēpu, tēnei te mihi atu ki a koutou katoa nau mai, haere mai. O tira ia, kei te mihi atu au ki te haukāinga o te Atiawa, e noho nei ki tēnei whenua, e mihi atu nau ki a rātau. E hara tēnei te tū ki te takahi te mana o te haukāinga engari ko tāku, e mihi whakatau noi ho tēnei ki a koutou nō reira. I rungi tērā tuahuatanga nau mai, haere mai. Haere mai me ngā whakaaro ki a rātou kua riro ki te pō. Rātou ki a rātou, ko tātou nei te hunga ora ki a tātou katoa, huri no tō tātou nei whare tēnā koutou katoa. Kei te mihi atu au ki tēnei, te koro o te rangi. Tō tātou nei toka Māori, kua haere mai i wāhi ke atu, ko hoki mai ki te wā kāinga. Nō reira tēnei rā, huri no tō tātou nei whare ngā mana nui, ngā maunga whakatikitike, e mihi atu au ki a koutou. Long way of saying welcome. Welcome to you all. On behalf of our local people here in Te Atiawa, just wanted to extend our, on their behalf, to our country. When I say that, I also acknowledge all of those who have come to Aotearoa from different parts of Australia, and I acknowledge your country as well, different Big C. And we want to acknowledge you, your ancestors, your leaders, past, present, and into the future as well. We acknowledge you being an Australian and New Zealand event. Also wanted to acknowledge our special guest, of course, our Minister, Tēnā koe Minister, lovely to have you here, and our leadership at this special table, and all of those who have travelled from around the country and from Australia. Welcome to Te Whanganui a Tara, the great harbour of Tara. I also acknowledge those who have passed away. Those of your loved ones, and we blend them in with our loved ones today, that we will never forget them. We always remember them. Those who pass away from your family and those from our family, we respect and we remember them at this time. Coming back to the land of the living, I acknowledge this piece of pounamu at the front of the stage here today. It's called Te Kuro o Te Rangi. Te Kuro o Te Rangi is a piece of Māori stone that AFAC takes with them wherever we have significant events, and this is one of those. It travels all over Australia, but it's a reminder, it's a piece of Aotearoa that they take with them. It has the Māori, or the life essence of home. It's come from the Arahura River, and it's called Te Kuro o Te Rangi, which means the crimson sky. So in the morning when they look our way, there's a red glow in the sky, and hopefully that will have them remember that Aotearoa is part of AFAC. And in the evening when the sun sets, we look to the west, and the crimson sky, or Te Kuro o Te Rangi, reminds us that we are connected to AFAC from Aotearoa, New Zealand. So, special piece of stone here. If you ever come past it, please touch it, because it's meant to be touched, and you add your life force, your positive energy into the stone, into the Māori stone. And when it goes back to Melbourne, I know they look after it so well, and it gets carried around and taken first class on all of the planes over there as well. And if you ever come to an AFAC conference, you'll see it at the front of the dais like this as well. So thank you to the whānau from AFAC for bringing it over, Rob. And of course, we was privileged to be part of the Reconciliation Action Plan launch, which we're also reflecting up here from our Indigenous brothers and sisters from Aotearoa. Bueno, I said to myself that I should only speak 2 minutes, because we've got a wonderful, I want to acknowledge our Rōpū waiata here, just come down during their lunch hour just to sing us a few waiata. So I won't stand in the way between that and our next speaker. So, Des, tēnā koe, whakahaere nei ngā kaupapa i tēnei rā. Nō reira, huri no tō tātou nei whare, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Tō reira ka tikina ngā kōrero a koe mā koro mā piti hono tātou hono ko rātou mā te hunga mati ki a rātou haere. Acknowledge all of those who have passed away, let them travel in peace. A piti hono tātou hono ko tātou nei te hunga ora ki a tātou katoa, huri noa tō tātou nei whare. To all of us gathered here today, I acknowledge you all, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thanks, Steve.
Kia ora, Piki. Piki Thomas, ladies and gentlemen, Deputy Chief Executive from Fire and Emergency New Zealand and the Fire and Emergency Waiata Group. Yeah. Thank you so much for that wonderful mihi whakatau. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to the 2025 AFAC Lessons Management Forum, being held for the first time here in Wellington. We're immensely proud of that. And a special welcome to all our participants joining us online from around New Zealand, Australia, and the rest of the world today. Our forum is hosted by AFAC, the Australian and New Zealand Council for Fire and Emergency Services, and supported by ADAR, the Australian Institute for Disaster Resilience. My name's Des Hosey. I'm a National Advisor for Safety, Continuous Improvement and Lessons Management and things that go bump in the night at Fire and Emergency New Zealand. It's my immense privilege to be your forum host, so you'll see a little bit of me during the next few days. Before we dive into the program, I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge our incredible sponsors. Without them, we wouldn't be here over the next few days. The ACMC, the Australian Civil Military Centre, once again supporting us as our gold sponsor. And NEMA, the National Emergency Management Agency of New Zealand, joining us this year as our silver sponsor. We thank you both for your generous contributions to the Lessons Management Forum. So, during the breaks, please make sure to visit the back of the room. We've got some collateral and flyers and information down there, and find out what ACMC and NEMA New Zealand are doing in the lessons management area. And as I mentioned earlier, can I please just remind you to ensure that those cell phones are now switched to silent. Thanks so much for that. I would now like to welcome the Honourable Brooke Van Velden, Minister of Internal Affairs, Workplace Relations and Safety, to deliver our opening address. Minister.
Thank you very much, Des. And look, it's a real pleasure to be here today, opening the Lessons Management Forum 2025, co-hosted by the Australian and New Zealand Council for Fire and Emergency Services and the Australian Institute for Disaster Resilience. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you, including those who have travelled from outside of Wellington, as well as those tuning in online. I'd like to also acknowledge our Chief Executive, Kerry Gregory, and also Piki. Thank you very much for the lovely mihi whakatau. I've spent a lot of time with Kerry, out and about with many of our volunteers and firefighters across New Zealand, and had a real pleasure to spend time with you, Piki, up at Paihia, meeting and greeting a few of the team up there too. This forum is a testament to the commitment and dedication of professionals across emergency management, resilience planning, and community leadership. As the Minister of Internal Affairs, I oversee Fire and Emergency New Zealand, made up of over 10,000 volunteers and career firefighters who respond to fires, extreme weather events, medical incidences, and other emergencies. Every challenge faced by emergency services, whether in response to crises, natural disasters, or operational complexities, presents an opportunity to reflect, learn, and refine how to serve and support our diverse communities. I know that fire and emergency are continuously learning and improving the way they respond to incidences, as well as adapting to challenges in a changing environment. The strength of any response effort, whether large scale or local, is built on a foundation of shared knowledge, collaboration, and continuous improvement. Learning from past experiences is essential to evolve strategies, enhance preparedness, and ensure that future responses are more effective, coordinated, and resilient. That's why this event is a collective effort to foster innovation, challenge assumptions, and embrace new ways of thinking. You each play an essential part in the collaborative response to emergencies across Australia and New Zealand. By taking the time to engage in these discussions, reflect on past experiences, and challenge traditional approaches, you are contributing to a culture of continuous improvement, one that will shape the response to future emergencies and strengthen the resilience of our communities. For those attending in person, I encourage you to use this forum as an opportunity to build lasting connections, exchange ideas, and establish networks that will serve you not only in times of crisis, but also in moments of planning and proactive engagement. Now, it is a shame because I can't be here for the full forum, so I will need to leave relatively soon. But I really think the whole forum is just such a massive opportunity for everybody to get what they are hoping to get from today and the following days. Unfortunately, I need to return to the debating chamber, and so I hope what you experience here is a bit more collegial than what we will experience for the rest of the day. But thank you very much for allowing me to be part of this opening ceremony, and I wish you all a very successful and insightful forum. Thank you, and good luck.
Thank you, Minister Van Velden, and for making the time in what I know is an extremely busy week for the government. I'd now like to invite my boss, Kerry Gregory, Chief Executive and National Commander of Fire and Emergency New Zealand, also AFAC Board Director, to say a few words on behalf of the AFAC Council. Kerry.
E mihi ana kia koutou, nau mahara mai ki te whanganui atara, nau mahara mai ki te hui whakahirahira. So welcome today, welcome to you all, welcome to Wellington, and welcome to this really important occasion. Me tūnei au ki runga I te whenua o te Atiawa, tēnei taku mihi ki te mana whenua. I just acknowledge the Te Atiawa being this land in New Zealand. But it's a real pleasure to be here today to, on behalf of the AFAC Board and the AFAC Council, and also Fire and Emergency, to be a part of opening this forum and actually saying, thank you for coming, thank you for your continuous desire to improve in what we do. I also just want to thank our Minister. I know she has a very busy time schedule, and to take some time to be here for the first forum in New Zealand, really appreciated. I want to acknowledge the Chief Exec for AFAC, Rob Webb. So, thank you, Rob, for coming over and being part of this. I know Rob's work is tireless and, what AFAC is delivering, and as a board member for the AFAC board, I'm really proud of the work that we're doing as an AFAC organisation. Also want to acknowledge Dave Gawn. So we talk about the sponsorship, but the support across the wider sector that we have between NEMA and the organisation that I lead, I think is really seamless, and just striving to be better that we can as different organisations to support New Zealand. And I think that alongside the connection across Australia and New Zealand in the different forums is really beneficial to the whole system as a whole. I want to acknowledge Leanna Roast, so the Head of Thought Leadership at the United Kingdom Resilience Academy. So she's going to be our first speaker today, first keynote speaker. Really looking forward to your session and looking forward to that. So thank you for coming and being a part of for the session for us. Alistair Dawson, Inspector General of Emergency Management Queensland. I acknowledge you for being here, and thank you for being here, Alistair, and appreciate the support that you keep giving into the AFAC arena. Just a few other people I'd like to acknowledge. Megan Stifler, who is the operational lead now for Fire and Emergency New Zealand, an Australian who's come over to New Zealand. So, a great example of the two countries sharing knowledge and sharing experiences to help each other, learn from each other and move forward as a country. So thank you, Megan, for being here. But also Des Hosey, Des is from Fire and Emergency, is a champion for lessons management and making sure that we're actually learning and turning the learning into operational advancements. But second time chairing for this forum, Des, and I know you did a fantastic job last time, and it's really good for you to stand up into that space and do that for this forum again. And the last two I'd like to thank is again Piki for your mihi whakato today, respecting the traditions in New Zealand and making sure that they're done properly for us as we bring everyone together, and our fantastic Waiata Ropu group from Fire and Emergency New Zealand who come together and do this in their lunch times and their breaks just because they love the kaupapa and enjoy the Waiata and support us in occasions like this when we can. So a big mihi to all of you today. I often, when I speak, share whakatoki, which are proverbs and things which I guess in some degree stimulate thought and thinking. And so I share one with you today of "Ma te kimi ka kite, ma te kite ka mohio, ma te mohio ka marama," which is seek and discover, discover and know and become enlightened. And I thought that was really relative to what we're doing over the next couple of days of just seeking to discover so we can actually turn that discovery into something meaningful. And that is always the challenge, is like many people go to many different forums all across the world. They hear really good things and said, yeah, no, I agree with that. That's really good. But how do we take that and we actually turn it into something tangible and apply it back into, all the mahi, all the work that we do every day? So I think that's the challenge for all of us, as we move through these things of how do we turn the knowledge and the learning into actually something that's going to be meaningful and tangible for the system and the sector as a whole. When I think back to my times, my early years and times, writing appliances and responding to incidents, some of the most valuable things that came out of that wasn't the response to the incidents, but it was actually the learning afterwards, the reflection, the discussion around, what we can do better. And this is no different. This is, what do we collectively know? How do we share that? And how do we learn from that and take that forward? So it, that still serves me well today, and I still, really value the power of reflection and just striving to see what we can learn and take forward from there. So this forum, it's really about advancing how our sector turns that experience into action, really focusing on the most pressing and the innovative topics shaping fire and emergency today. The forum really spotlights real world case studies in emergency management and looks at how those lessons and the lessons management can be embedded into the strategic decision making. So when you look at that, it's really important around, the topics, the discussion today of of guiding the sector into the future. It's about sharing best practice, research and new strategies that identifies gaps. So we're ready and empowered to meet whatever challenges come next. And who knows what that next is. We try to anticipate the future. Often we're sadly left wanting. But it's being ready. It's about doing the thinking, doing the preparatory work around, what do we need to be, what questions do we need to be asking ourselves now that will be needing answers in the future to come. So the learnings that you take over the next few days may just help for the rest of your career, no matter who you are or what you do through there. So over the next few days, I encourage you all to be open to different perspectives, engage deeply, and bring forward the lessons that have shaped your pathway in the emergency management sector. The conversations that we have here will probably ripple out and influence, the different ways that we safeguard communities, the ways that we interact with communities, and what we're learning. So on behalf of the AFAC board and council, I just want to again thank you for your unwavering dedication. Thank you for being here today. And I leave you with one last whakatauki in there, which is, ko te manu e kai ana te miro nona te nahere, ko te manu e kai ana I te mātauranga mo te ao. And that's the forest belongs to the bird that feasts on the miro berry, but the world belongs to the bird that feasts on knowledge. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, kia ora koutou katoa.
Thank you, Kerry, for those wise and insightful words. Thank you very much. It's now my great pleasure to welcome Chief Executive David Gawn, MBE, from the National Emergency Management Agency of New Zealand to say a few words as host agency.
Thank you, Des. Kia ora, everybody. It's always hard being the third act. So I just want to do some thank yous very quickly. Picky, Kerry, Rob, Diana, I acknowledge all of you, and also all the manahiri, particularly those who have come from overseas. Kerry identified Megan, called her out. We swapped her with Mike Bush. I know who got the better deal. So again, welcome, Megan, and it's going to be great to work with you. Unfortunately, the Honourable Mark Mitchell, Minister for Emergency Management and Recovery, couldn't be with us today. He couldn't quite wrangle his calendar and question time and everything else, but he did ask me to extend his best wishes for your conference and to thank AFAC and to thank you and ADA for convening this important kōrero, particularly as it's here in New Zealand, and that really is fantastic. So I pass on his apologies. NEMA is delighted to be a silver sponsor. I didn't know that until I actually came here, but we're delighted to be a silver sponsor to this very important event. And I do want to say how much we value the opportunity to network, to exchange ideas, and most importantly, to do so, as I say, on Aotearoa New Zealand soil. That really is great from my perspective. Now, as Chief Executive of NEMA, I know that my staff always wonder what's going to come out of my mouth and whether I'm going to follow the script. I generally don't. But today you'll be pleased, Joe, that I am, sort of. So I want to just emphasise our unwavering commitment to lessons management and continuous improvement. And it's not just us as an organisation, but to me personally, and I've been involved in this in terms of lessons management from a very early stage during my military career. These are not just operational necessities, they are fundamentally principles that must underpin everything that we do in the emergency management system. I'll use, it's not quite a Mickey whakatau, but as Terry Pratchett said, wisdom comes from experience, and experience is often the result of a lack of wisdom. We do not learn from experience particularly well, we learn from reflecting on those experiences. Emergencies often expose the vulnerabilities that we didn't anticipate, whether in infrastructure, communication, or preparedness, or in those moments, the lack of prior wisdom becomes painfully clear, and both countries have experienced that in the recent past. Emergency management is an iterative field. Every response builds a deeper reservoir of wisdom. As protocols are refined, communities become more resilient, not because they avoid failure, but because they've learned from it. Our mistakes, our delays, the system failures become lessons, not just for connecting the past, but for improving future response. But experience is a hard teacher because it gives us the test first and then the lesson afterward. For me, lessons management is most valuable when it inspires aspirational change. It's not just a process, it's a mindset, a commitment to ask the big questions, to reflect deeply, and to use what we've learned to drive meaningful change across all levels of the system. And that means asking hard questions and having, as we all talk about, the courageous conversations. What do we really learn? How can we do it better next time? And what must we change now to be more prepared for tomorrow? And the one that I particularly like, because I think we're all guilty of it, do we have an optimism bias as we reflect on the past? But to do this well, we must create a culture of honesty and transparency. We must allow ourselves and each other to be vulnerable. That's how we drive conversations that matter, how we unlock real progress. We also know that the best lessons don't come from one voice alone. They come from open collaboration. Across government, iwi, business, emergency services, non-profits, and our communities, across nations. Only together can we capture the full picture, not just fragments. Only together can we build a truly connected and adaptive system. So I encourage you throughout this event to share openly, to listen actively, and to be willing to challenge the assumptions that may be holding us back. This is a unique opportunity for us to learn, not just from each other, but with each other. And finally, I urge you to think beyond your own agency or discipline. Consider the system-wide implications, the second and third order effects of what you've been learning and how those lessons influence practice across sectors, across regions, and as I said, across nations. In this work, none of us stands alone. Integrated independence, where each part of the system maintains its strengths while contributing to the whole. That is our goal. It's not just about being self-reliant, it's about being part of something bigger and stronger because of the interconnections. So let's be bold, let's be honest, and let's commit ourselves to continuous improvement for the sake of our people, our communities, and the future of emergency management across Aotearoa and beyond. Mo tātou, a mo ka uri, a muri ake nei, for us and our children after us. Ngā mihi.
Kia ora mai tātou wā, hei whakatuwhera i tō tātou ara ki a e te rungarawa, a māku tētai karakia e taki. A tīkina nā pūtake o te kōrero, te wānanga, tīkina te hautapu o ngāriki, kauwhata te tāne te wānanga ki runga ki tēnei whakaminenga, kia koe te matapunenga, kia maingangi te matapuiho, ka whakamau ai kia tīna, haumi e hui e, tāeki e.
Kia ora and thank you. That beautiful Waiata song brings our welcoming to a close and into the forum reel now. And David, thank you. Beautiful words. Thank you very much. And thanks for being here along with all our CEs and wonderful VIPs that are joining us. And, you know, VIP I use for all of you in the room. You're all very important and thank you for taking the time to be here with us. I'll introduce our keynote speaker in a moment, but before I do, I'd like to provide you with some brief housekeeping notes for both our participants here in the room and those of you that are joining us online. So, did I mention please switch your cell phones to silent? Chocolate fish on it, remember, so just be careful about that. And in the case of an emergency, please exit the room and evacuate the building. Our evacuation point is outside in the big square out here. It's called Odland Square. And our two main exits are over here and down the stairs and out the exit door, or this exit door here. Now, they're quite small exits, so in an orderly fashion, which I'm sure you'd all be able to do, we'll split the room in half in case of an emergency. This half out this exit, this half out this exit. New Zealand's not really known for earthquakes, but if one did happen per chance, drop cover and hold under the tables if it's a biggie. Otherwise, we'll orderly move outside. And if, as my daughter used to say, there's a salami coming, meaning a tsunami, which because we're on the harbour, we have to be aware of that, you'll get good direction from the staff here, and we'll move out of the square and up Taranaki Street, which is the main street here, up above the swimmable area. So hopefully we won't be dealing with any of that over the next few days. As I pointed out earlier, but just reiterate because it's really important, bathroom facilities are out the door here, down the stairs to the left, and left again to find those. Today, we'll be making use of the Slido app. That's for our Q&A, and we'll be able to take questions from all the participants, both here in the room and those of you joining us online, using the Slido link and QR code, which is on the screen, the QR code up here on the screen, and in the back of your delegate handbook for those of you in the room. So any questions you have, pop them into the Slido app, and we'll have a couple of minutes at the end for each speaker to take a couple of questions. If there are more questions, we're going to answer those with the presenters online through the Slido app later on. So we'll try and get through as many of your questions, either in person or online, as we can. For those of you online, I encourage you to use the chat window to share any thoughts or reflections during the presentations. And just a reminder to please keep your microphones muted at home when you're in the main presentation room. We will be recording today's forum and making all presentations, including slides, available to participants after the event on our website. And I'd just like to remind you to please be respectful with each other and our presenters when posting your comments or questions. So this year, we're really excited to have a very accomplished keynote speaker who's travelled all the way from the United Kingdom to be with us in the company of her lovely daughter. Liana Roast is the Head of Thought Leadership at the United Kingdom Resilience Academy. Liana's passionate about learning at every level, in theory and practice. Her primary expertise focuses on concepts, policy and practice relating to the management of lessons from emergency exercises, major incidents and crisis events. Her role as Head of Thought Leadership at the UK Resilience Academy, formerly known as the Emergency Planning College, Liana helps to connect innovative, strategic, big picture thinking with the practical, operational delivery of professional resilience education, training and exercise. She also leads on a program of public-facing work commissioned by the UK Government Cabinet Office to synthesise lessons from exercise and emergencies. This includes production and publication of the UK Resilience Lessons Digest, which many of us have made reference to and really enjoy. She's currently exploring how to extend while also examining how artificial intelligence can be used strategically to add value and advance practice in the lessons space. You can read Liana's full bio in the delegate handbook. So look, me in welcoming Liana Roast to the stage.
Thank you, Des. Thank you, everybody. It is such a personal joy and professional privilege to be with you here in Wellington this afternoon. And I would like to begin, if I may, not only by thanking Des for that warm welcome, but thanking the conference organisers and sponsors for the invitation to join you here and to join you on live stream as well. So thank you very much. Ordinarily, I am based in Manchester in the United Kingdom, but I was born in the south of England in a farming area and spent about 20 years with a Londoner. So if you're wondering why my accent is slightly strange, it could also be that I've got picked up a few different things across the UK on the way. I travel to our main base where the UK Resilience Academy is based in a place called York, which is North England, and also down to London to Whitehall, of course, where central government offices and Parliament can be found. If you have not heard of the UK Resilience Academy, you can be wholeheartedly forgiven because it's only existed for 3 weeks. Formerly known, it was called Cabinet Office Emergency Planning College. And 3 weeks ago, yesterday, in fact, we were at the Hawk Hills estate, ministerial launch of the Academy, which really signals a strategic shift towards increasing societal resilience and enhancing training and education resilience for professionalization, fostering greater collaboration. So all the more meaningful to be here today presenting to you. For context, the Academy and formerly the college, we work across the resilience community. So that is with what we would refer to as our category 1, 2 and 3 responders. That's emergency services and blue lights, local and devolved governments, resilience forums, which make up our local resilience partners, voluntary and community sector, business and academia. So the whole lot in effect. By way of brief personal introduction, my background was not initially in emergency management. I spent 17 years in the voluntary and community sector, working on education and community learning initiatives, particularly with marginalised and vulnerable groups, before moving into academia, taking a specialism in psychology and neuroscience, and then after that, completely logically, disaster management. And actually, in coming into the resilience arena, it's been a coming together of what seemed at the time to be quite disparate skills, but really have found my spot, if you like, and I absolutely love it. And the golden thread, of course, that runs throughout has always been about making a positive difference wherever I can. And it seemed to me that emergency management, disaster management, and resilience was a key area to be working to achieve just that. So in my role, I do a number of different things, and Des, thank you for that introduction. But the one I'm going to be speaking to you about today is the UK Resilience Lessons Digest. It is our national learning product. And I will tell you exactly what it is, just in case you haven't seen it in a moment. And what I'm really going to do is talk you through some of the lessons that we corporately, as those working on it in the UK, have learned, but also in the spirit of honesty and community here, some quite personal reflections on how I've found it leading that kind of work, because I think that's important as well. So I will start with a brief overview of what it is. I'm assuming this button clicks my slides, does it? Oh, green button, almost got it wrong. That makes perfect sense. Thank you. So the UK Resilience Lessons Digest was born in concept in 2022. And what I had to start with was nothing more than problems and a central government commitment. But this was actually vital and one of the greatest gifts I could have been handed in starting the work, because we had identified lessons one which had gone out to consultation. And these were their findings, as I've popped on the slide. In response, UK government said, we are committed to undertaking a programme of work at the Emergency Planning College, now UKRA, Resilience Academy, to synthesise lessons of all exercises and emergencies. And then I came into role. So looking back, it was an incredible gift, because I was put in role to create something which was a response to a lesson identified in itself. And crucially, I had senior, top-down, not just engagement, but a directive for what I needed to do. I needed to deliver on the central government commitment. The Resilience Lessons Digest was ultimately the result, and these are our 3 objectives, which every product we publish has to tie directly to, in keeping with them, as they link back into that central government commitment and the findings, the lessons identified in those reports. So that is what it is. This is what it did look like. It has recently, in line with the launch of the UKRA, had an upgrade, or we're not quite sure if it's an upgrade yet because we don't have any feedback on it, but it's been newly branded for our 6th edition. And essentially, just to give you a bit of a flavour, it's an open source digital publication. Every edition has a thematic focus with a central learning analysis, where I draw in lessons already identified from a range of sources in order to understand what some of the common learning themes are and the transferable lessons are for other organisations who are going to be reading it from different perspectives. We do 3 per calendar year. And then about 6 or 8 weeks post-publication, you may have seen or even attended our webinar, where we try to extend the audience and grab what are often very, very busy, as I'm sure you'll appreciate, first-line responders who may not have time to read what's been written, which is absolutely fair enough. So I shall talk a bit about the journey. You can see there were some stats there. We do have a large central mailing list, which goes out. Where it goes beyond that is unknown, but I am here. So that hopefully is, well, it certainly is very positive feedback, and it's a joy to meet online with the Lessons Nerd Herd, if I may just reference that. So I'm going to split what I'm saying into 3 parts. Don't worry, they're not hugely long. But the first really is just to look back a little. These 6 points are the lessons. I hope you will afford me some artistic license for the presentation, in that I know that they are not well articulated, high quality lessons in the way that they are set out as statements, but hopefully you will see where I'm going with that as I go along. Then in part 2, I'm going to talk a little bit about the reality of doing that on the ground and setting it up. And then in part 3, talk about where it took us going forward. So, part 1, knowing where you came from. This was really important, and I've already briefed you in on where the digest came from, and I shan't labour the history, but just to make the point here. Back in 2001, and especially for those who might not know the landscape in the UK around resilience and emergency management, there was an emergency planning review, and this placed a real emphasis on learning from emergencies. And out of that was inaugurated the Civil Contingencies Secretariat, CCS, in Cabinet Office Central Government, which had the planning for dealing with and learning lessons from emergencies and disasters written into its remit. Following that, and also linked to the review, our primary legislation for emergency management, our Civil Contingencies Act, the CCA 2004, was passed, along with some statutory and non-statutory guidance for the local forums that were created out of it to manage local resilience matters. In the Act, there is also note for Category 1 responders in particular, that is the NHS, that is local governments, that is blue light services, to learn and implement lessons from exercises, share lessons around the UK, and ensure those lessons are acted on to improve local arrangements. So it's not that when the UK Resilience Lessons Digest was launched, there was no history of learning. There certainly was. It certainly was embedded. Even prior to 2001, it was in legislation left over from the end of the Cold War in terms of civil defence. So it wasn't that learning wasn't being done. It was most certainly there. Then, as we progress, I haven't put on here some of the major emergencies that we have experienced in that time. Of course, there have been many, but one that was very significant in terms of lessons was our 2005 7/7 terror attacks on London City Transport. That prompted a huge review called the Hallett Review, after the lady who conducted that. And it took some years before it was published, as you can see, in 2011, but was significant, and I mention it here because it led to the inauguration of something that you may be familiar with, which is the Joint Emergency Services Programme, which is now JESSOP, and focuses on interoperability and published the Joint Doctrine. The other thing that was significant about that was it had a remit within the doctrine to look at how they can use platforms to share lessons. And just before they launched that, there was another significant report reviewing 32 inquiries, which found that actually there weren't just lessons that perhaps weren't being learned because we saw them recurring in other incidents, but that actually there was a fundamental issue with the learning itself. And so the Common Recording and Reporting was put forward. And in 2015, Joint Organisational Learning, which is now JOL Online, was launched. And it wasn't until 2022 that the UK Resilience Lessons Digest appeared. So there was a history, and this really was a key learning point for me in taking on the challenge of producing a national learning product, because I'm sure, as we all appreciate, if you don't know your history, if you don't know where you've come from, how can you know how to pitch what you need to present and where you need to go with it? So for me, that was really important. The first lesson then, past is prologue. And the personal reflection is a little harsh on the surface of it, but it's not about you. What do I mean by that? When I was handed this remit, it felt quite a bit of pressure to deliver something that would manage to capture the national audience. It was also a challenge because being passionate about the learning of lessons, I knew that however much passion and good practices and great layout I poured into it, that it couldn't learn a single lesson for anyone. And that was really challenging. Unless, of course, I could help get them to pick it up, put it into practice, bring it into the workplace. And really, I had to keep reminding myself that this was ultimately about saving lives, which is what I'm passionate about, but also about the other people who'd be using it, that it wasn't all on me, and that I needed to make sure I'd remembered the past so that I could be as careful as possible to proceed sensitively, with honesty, with empathy for those who were involved or perhaps experienced significant loss, even loss of life, in the generation of the lessons I was going to be synthesizing, and also the complexity, knowing that it wasn't going to be a simple matter. Part 2, knowing where you're going. It would be good, wouldn't it? So I had the top-down central government commitment, and here in blue, you can see the kind of things that I was being, this is what I was hearing. I decided to start by listening. I had plenty of my own ideas, but I didn't want to go and impose them on everybody. I really needed to know what was required of me and of this product, and also what those local responders at the community level actually wanted, if they wanted it at all, and if they did, how it would be most helpful to approach and design it. So from the top down, I was hearing about desires to create community buy-in, ensure there's an applied benefit. We've got a business to run. We need to ensure that it helps direct and support that bigger work. We'd like some buildability, so something where we can see that there's offshoots and different opportunities that it will create. And please, please, can you create a buzz? Just create a buzz. And I was like, yes, that would be great, wouldn't it? And so I had to really go away, and being a bit of a psychologist and into the neuroscience of learning, I was like, what's the psychology of buzz? How do we make that happen? And of course, it is the excitement that spreads around an idea, person, or product. But actually, as I looked into the research, it made perfect sense, because it really hinged on 3 things: on mentalizing, on meaning, and motivation. And so, in other words, in order to create that buzz, people had to be able to imagine in their minds what they were going to get or what they might get, understand that it would be really meaningful to them, and actually then be motivated to engage with it and to share it onwards with others. No problem. So that was something I really took a hold of as I then went into conversation with local community members of the emergency services, people who'd been in the game longer than I had, who knew that history, who perhaps knew it better than me. And actually they were then saying things like, is this just replication? It was almost a skeptical, half pessimism in some cases, not in all cases, that actually this was going to be something else they would have to read that they haven't got time to read, and that actually people were already busy trying to do things and producing other things and not really sure there's space in the market for this. They were reluctant in some cases to receive anything new at all. But for others, they were thirsty, they were desperate, they were looking for something that they could access easily, where they could bring this together, because they didn't have time to read 10 reports. They just needed to know what the 10 reports kind of, said, what the key learning points were, what the learning themes were, so that they could get to the action. So it was a real spread, but certainly what came across in all of that was that it needed to be very readable and very realistic in terms of its ability to be put into practice. I then decided, having had those conversations, that if I couldn't see it, no one else would be able to either. So in a spare room of my house where my laptop lived at the time, I started to imagine not so much initially what the product would look like, but what it would be like, what it would be, what it would not be, what I was passionate about it including, and what I didn't want to get caught up in when I put it together. I already had the 3 key objectives from the central government commitment. A 6-point vision framework was open for me to create. And this is what I came up with, 6 V's. I wanted it to have veracity, which in other words, I want it to be authentic, to know what it was there to do, to know what it could not do, and to try not to blur the lines into other areas with other products, but have its own unique, authentic, distinct personality, if you like, and remit. You needed to have voice, and that wasn't all about my voice. That was voice to the lessons that have been identified across the country in different thematic areas by different organizations, and to share those, to put that out there. It needed absolutely to have validity. If this wasn't an evidence-based document, how could we ever expect for anyone to take it seriously? Value was a non-negotiable. If it's not valuable to the people on the ground, why are we producing it? It wasn't an academic exercise. This was very much an applied analysis. Vibrant speaks for itself. I don't know, I can only speak for Britain, but occasionally our reports look very boring. And sometimes the documents aren't very engaging. I'm sure they're perfect here. But this one needed to look different. It needed to feel different. I want it to feel fresh, and also start to engage the sort of now and next generations in emergency management. And the final thing I wanted was for it to be versatile, poised to pivot, so that in the event of a major emergency, there could be a special edition, or there could be a focus that it could take on when needed. And once I'd actually sat down, and that didn't come together as quickly as I've said it, it took a lot of thought and consideration. But once I'd put that together, and then went back to some of the communities, and then went back to colleagues in central government and in the college or the academy, people started to see it, and people started to get excited about it. And it was really a case of passion before product, because I still didn't have a single page written. But we started to coalesce around this vision for what we wanted to create, and made sure as well we had some guiding principles for the lessons we were going to be bringing into it, in terms of it being anchored into that shared understanding of risk, an acknowledgement that lessons are time sensitive, but not time limited, because I didn't want to rule out the possibility of revisiting lessons from 20, 30, 40 years ago if they still haven't been learned. But also that commitment, again, to applied analysis, in that the lessons weren't going to be an academic exercise, although they are academically grounded, making sure they mattered on the ground. So that would be the second learning point from me, the primacy of vision. If we can't see it, neither can they. And it's not taught, it's got to be caught. And I think the more people that can catch the vision for what you're trying to achieve, the better. That involved listening. It involved looking, independent research, and gathering those comments in. And then it involved sharing the vision with others. Working it all out. This is where it got fun and where it got messy. What are we going to put in it? Whose lessons are we collecting? How do we know if they're validated? How do we know if they're evidence-based? What will the page look like? Will there be moving videos? How are we going to present the text? The list goes on. This took us about 10 weeks, 12 weeks, because that was what we had. It could have taken longer. Yes, it really did start with me on a piece of paper and a ruler and a biro, trying to map out what the first edition might include. It also involved creating a baseline of organisations who we felt we could rely on in terms of the evidence, because of course, if you go online and type in lessons from COVID, we all know you have millions and millions and millions of hits, and some of them are blogs with people's own personal learnings. Others are assumptions which may or may not be correct, but may not have the evidence base beneath them. So we considered where our lessons might come from. And ultimately, we had the government departments, we had agencies and arm's length bodies who also have a sound reputation for evaluation and analysis, obviously academic institutions, and a few different organisations who we knew were significant in the game to draw on. So that was very, very helpful. Then we also thought about what would it look like, and I'm internally grateful that there was a decision to put some funding in to help it look good. That made me feel a whole lot better, because I was trying to mock things up. And whilst I do like a good aesthetic, I was no graphic designer. So I would reflect on that the investment is worth it in terms of doing that. And we had a couple of concepts, a couple of ideas. We still haven't got to the point of embedding videos yet, but you never know. Now we're an academy, we might just manage it. So it was messy, but looking back, it was fun as well. It was exciting. And this I just wanted to share with you, not to go into detail because I'm aware of time, but this model is actually a business model. I don't know if any of you have read the book called Predictable Success by Les McKeown. It's interesting because I hadn't read it before I did the digest, but having read it after I did the digest, now I understand a little more what was going on. And he charts out this course of setting up a new business, and where it can be flying and then where it can all go wrong. And certainly I really resonate with this model in pioneering a national learning product, because we absolutely did have the early struggle. What is this? Does anybody want it? How are we going to make it happen? Then we got to that messy part. We got to the fun, where we were looking at designs, thinking about the page, thinking about how we were going to do it. And then that whitewater part, that's where things go crazy and it's all moving really fast around you. And I would liken that to when we released Digest 1. It went live, silently, online. And we waited. Has anyone looked at it? Has anyone shared it? Does anyone know it's out? Of course they did. Of course they didn't. And you're not really sure if this thing you've spent months creating is ever going to be looked at by anyone. And all of a sudden we realized people were looking and they were liking it. Don't get me wrong, there were some things they didn't like as well. We had to take the rough with the smooth. But it was just crazy. And then we decided to put the webinar on. And we were like, well, look, if we get 50 people, that is a great start. And I'll never forget the phone call with my colleague in cabinet. And I said, oh, where are we up to? And she's like, Liana, yeah, we've got more than 500 signups. And I was like, what? I had no idea. But people were hungry for learning. People wanted to learn together. People wanted to, they were in need of help synthesizing so much information, so much data. And so we stumbled into whitewater, where it all happened very quickly and readily. And I just love this quote, that when blazing a new trail, seek not perfection, but progress. For with agility and simplicity, the seeds of stability take root. And that's been a great comfort. So moving on to the third lesson, the privilege of pioneering. It's easy to despise the day of the small things, but actually it's fun. You get to go, then you get to grow, and then you get to go again. And sometimes you've gone slightly the wrong direction and you get pulled back, and other times you just keep going. But it is a privilege. So with all your products, enjoy the journey. Moving swiftly on. We then extended the invitation as part of the first digest to other guest contributors. And this was an interesting decision at the time, because it was initially just our voice into the local community. But we felt really strongly that actually the voice of the local community needed to be represented in the national product. So we were also aware of the distributed knowledge across the local and regional networks, and of course into the global networks. And I must share that in the UK, we really do look to New Zealand and to Australia and to others in the space at the excellent work that you are doing. Government departments frequently cite how useful your resources have been. And we knew that we didn't have all the answers. We knew we were learning together. And we also found that actually by inviting others to collaborate, we created networks of networks of networks, which then supported readership and helped us to remain relevant. It also gave us extra reach and resource. So the fourth point, the power of partnership. Invite them, ask them what their experience is, ask them about the problems you're facing. I certainly did. And then extend the network again. Invite, ask, and extend. It's a bit like eat, sleep, repeat, but in the national learning product space. Take others with you. There's an old adage, isn't there? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with friends. Putting the processes in place. This goes back to the predictable success model, which essentially says that it's introducing the sort of the right amount of systems and processes to tame complexity that help achieve predictable success in a product or a business, but then trying to balance that with the maintenance of entrepreneurial zeal, creativity, and risk-taking to ensure that growth isn't stifled. This simple six-step process was what the reader saw in the first digest. Behind the scenes, it looked like a whole lot of conversations around these areas. What would our methodology be? Because we certainly had a lot of variables across our different reports. We picked a qualitative metasynthesis, which I'm happy to talk about at length for those of you who are interested later on. We discussed processes for contributions. How would we communicate to our contributors the guidelines we wanted them to follow to ensure a coherent and consistent product? We decided they needed handrails and a good sense of where we were going, but not handcuffs so that they couldn't write their lessons and their learnings freely. We needed to consider our clearance processes, which I'm sure many of you will be managing as well in different areas, how and when it would be published, and also engagement in terms of our comms planning on social, on email mailing lists, internal government, external government, because it now gets fed back into Parliament in terms of questions and things like that. So there was a lot to look at, and certainly considering the style, the design, the branding, these things all were equally important. And that brought us to the fifth learning point, which was the purpose of process. I think we found we had to have a level of rigor, but that didn't mean we needed rigidity. We needed flexibility and adaptability, which ultimately mirrors the risk environment that we find ourselves in. We did hope for predictable success, the action, the processes, and we have seen numbers increase as we've had subsequent editions published. So in a sense, there is an achievement around that. But if any of you can remember the model, we now have to be careful of the treadmill, where it just becomes boring process over people, and heaven forbid that we should enter the death rattle, as Les McEwen puts it in his model. I do recommend his book. But that also those processes have helped us grow in strength significantly, because people know where they stand, they know how it's done. If they ask questions, we can answer them comprehensively. So the details do have to be part of the dream. And finally, part 3, knowing where to go next. We never really knew the digest would take us to where we were today. I'd love to say it was a great master plan and we always knew it was going to happen, but we truly didn't. And we feel incredibly fortunate that it has gone to the levels of engagement that it has. And this is kind of where it went. It actually started a narrative around lessons, because lessons management as a specialism, as a capability, it isn't quite the same in the UK. It's moving towards that now, but it can be more distributed across departments and in different organisations. So lessons management became part of the vocabulary and part of the narrative through the digests of building this kind of language. And finally, although having started the digest saying, shouldn't we have some guidance before we do a digest? Actually, it's been the other way around. The momentum has gathered pace, and actually then that was then a ready audience and an interested, engaged community who were asking for the guidance. So that is the UK's first lessons management guidance. It's best practice guidance because we've taken a lot of our collective knowledge from your excellent work as well, thank you, which we've then extended and made particularly pertinent for us in the UK context. We're also seeing communities of practice springing up, and I ideally hope one day maybe we could host this or something like this in the UK. I'm certainly have it in mind. We've been learning about our learning, what works, what doesn't, and we're about to extend into audio products. We will have a podcast coming soon. We've recorded a couple of those. It's not exclusively about the digest, but it will be from the academy and have a learning undertone to it throughout. And we're committed to remaining relevant. And that means we have to often think, okay, what do we start, what do we stop, and what do we maintain? And that's a really helpful way to think about what's going well, what we can what perhaps has had its season, and what we need to keep consistent, being aware that too many systems and processes can cause it to slow down, lose its flexibility, and end up being more inward looking rather than outward, which was always its purpose. And so the final point, the potential for progress. I think patience and progress are not enemies. I don't know that anyone ever said they were, but sometimes when you're sat at the desk, it can feel like it, or at least it did for me. But in fact, actually, during that time of seeming patience, sowing the seeds, the narrative, the words we're using, the phrases we're sharing and spreading and picking up, the needs that we're hearing from a range of different levels, and the opportunities that arise are really key in making that progress ultimately. So coming into land, I'll just put those up again. The past is prologue, the primacy of vision, the privilege of pioneering, the power of partnership, the purpose of process, and the potential for progress. Those were my key learnings from leading on the UK Resilience Lessons Digest. Thank you very much.
It's my great pleasure now in welcoming our next speaker for today. From Hetahoni St John Ambulance, please join me in welcoming Melanie Guthrie.
He makes it sound so formal, and for those of you who don't know me very well, I'm not particularly formal, so I'm not going to quite be on the same level that Des is. So hi, my name's Melanie Guthrie. I am from Hetahoni St John, where I'm working currently as an emergency management advisor. A little bit about my background. I started my working career a long time ago as a management accountant because way back then I had a real passion for systems and processes and structure. And the pay probably wasn't that bad either back then. But after a while, it started to become a little bit boring, and I found myself needing just a little bit more excitement. So I thought I would run off and join the ambulance service and became an ambulance officer. So it was a bit of an unusual move for me because prior to that, I could not stand the sight of blood. But as it turned out, after doing an observation shift, I wasn't so bad with blood after all. So after a few years of being an ambo, I moved around a lot, tried to find some roles where I could combine my love of systems, and I landed myself in emergency management. And that's where I had found my happy place. So a little bit of background in terms of the ambulance service in New Zealand. So we are contracted by Health New Zealand to lead the pre-hospital response by managing the triage, treatment and transport of patients. There are 2 emergency ambulance services in New Zealand. We've got Wellington Free and we've got Hetahone St John, where we all have a very close collaborative working relationship. Ambulance services also provide patient transfer services between healthcare services and also health services at events. So it's not just about running around with lights and sirens, we do a whole lot more in the background. So emerging complexities. I feel like I should probably have moved to my slide earlier. So as for those of us who are in New Zealand, we all know that we are starting to have an increase in scale and complexity of emergencies and disruptive events. Examples such as Cyclone Gabrielle, the Christchurch earthquakes in Kaikoura, so I'm from Christchurch, so we've pretty much had it all down there, have shown us just how much of an impact these events can have. New Zealand's got a broad range of hazards that anyone who's in New Zealand would know. So we've got AF8, which for those of you who don't know is the Alpine Fault, would see widespread damage across the South Island with many communities being isolated. We've got the Hikurangi Trench, which would see significant earthquake damage to the North Island and catastrophic tsunamis across the east coast of New Zealand. It's all sounding a bit doom and gloom, isn't it? I have often contemplated whether or not I should perhaps move to Sweden, where it seems to be a little bit more less dramatic. And we also have a couple of ginormous volcanoes around there that might pop out something as well. So in New Zealand, these are a reality for us, and they will quickly overwhelm the available capacity of New Zealand. So within our organisation, we needed a structured system. I had the privilege to conduct the debriefs in St John for COVID and for Cyclone Gabrielle. Through this journey, I realised that it wasn't just the big things that were causing issues for people, but it was also those little things. I would be in a meeting and I would mention lessons learnt. Yes, I know, because someone would kick me under the table and go, it's lessons identified. So I wanted to understand a little bit more about this concept, and plus I felt like I might be part of the cool kids if I learnt a little bit more about it. So we had all of this information, and it was apparent from all of this that we needed a structured system to collate everything in a meaningful way. We needed to be able to leverage off our previous incidences to strengthen our readiness activities and to increase our resilience. Not only did we have a lot of actions that needed to be implemented, we also needed to measure that they were effective. So I read all the literature I could find. And for those of you who know me quite well, I have this ginormous literature library with every article. So if you ever need anything, just pop me an email and I'll be able to send you 1,000 articles. So from doing all of this reading, I started to understand that there was a place for lessons management framework in an ambulance service. And this is where our journey began. So I'm not a manager, I'm certainly not an expert in this, but I just wanted to share some of my observations in our journey. So my presentation is aimed at those who are new to lessons management or for those who are just beginning their journey. Hopefully from this you'll be able to take away some practical insights and see the value in developing a robust lessons management framework that is adaptable to your organisation. So why a lessons management framework? Scalable and adaptable. We encounter major incidents and emergencies almost on a daily basis for us. Whether it is a motor vehicle accident that has multiple patients, or we're dealing with a severe weather event that is impacting on our service delivery. We needed a system where we could manage large amounts of information across a range of incidents. We needed to cater for many sources of information, such as incident reports, after action reports, exercises, what Bob told you when you're off having coffee in the coffee room. We needed a system that could be used throughout the organisation to support clinical, operational and our enabling functions. So we needed something that was scalable and adaptable. Actions focused. We needed a system that was actions focused, where we could identify and track our actions collectively. We needed a simple mechanism in which to do this, where we could group information to identify patterns and trends. We needed a way to determine and to measure what success looked like for us. We needed to make sure that these measures of success were realistic and achievable. Most importantly, we wanted to enhance the learning from our previous incidents and understand the gaps to improve our plans and processes. Supporting transparency. We wanted a system that was transparent and enabled reporting to be shared sensitively. We often receive feedback around debriefs around people wanting to see them and people wanting to learn from them. But this was difficult for us to do as quite often debriefs contained identifiable information, and we wanted to provide a level of protection against this. We could see that a lessons management framework would allow us to share information in a meaningful and respectful way. It would enable visibility across our organisation and support a culture of continuous learning. And it would allow us to build trust in the organisation's willingness to learn, adapt and improve. We wanted to be able to share our learnings with our partner agencies to increase our interoperability. And in time, we would like to be able to integrate our learnings into a wider healthcare or national framework. So how did we approach this? So informed design. We wanted to start with some evidence-informed foundations. As I said, we looked at anything and everything we could to get an understanding. We did further research of the oil process to make sure that I stood this inside out. Whilst it was helpful, it was evident that this was something that I just needed to practice. I took away a lot of learnings this morning around how I can go away and enhance my practice. So thank you for that. So we wanted to have evidence-informed foundations as we wanted to do this right. Collaborative development. We wanted a collaborative approach to engage the wider organisation in this process. We needed to understand how existing systems and processes could be integrated into the lessons management framework. There was already a lot of good work being done across the organisation, and we wanted to optimise and align that effort. We haven't quite fully nailed that part yet, but that's okay as we need to remain adaptable. Leveraged off partner agencies. We absolutely leveraged off our partner agencies in our develop process because there is no need to reinvent the wheel. Des from FENS was particularly helpful and had no hesitation in sharing anything and everything that they had. Bronwyn and Joe from NEMA had very invaluable feedback and were very supporting and encouraging. Collectively, through the lessons management community of practice led by Des and a number of others, this forum provided an invaluable place in which we could share our journeys and learn from each other. So all of this took time. Don't rush. There was a lot to read, there was a lot to take in. While it all made sense, we needed to understand where to best position this within our very large and complex organisation. So we made the initial decision to design a framework for the emergency ambulance service aspect of us and our key enablers. We plan to adapt the lessons management framework in time to include our wider organisation, such as community health services departments. So our development approach, senior leadership endorsement. An important aspect for us was to gain early senior leadership endorsement to support the development of the lessons framework. This made it easier for us to align the lessons management framework against other competing priorities in our work plans. Learning from the past, we've heard this a lot today, well I have. We took time to learn from the past and we collated observations over the last decade, and believe you me, there were a lot. But this for us built the foundation of our observation collection database, which is this ginormous spreadsheet. It has a lot of columns and a lot of pretty colours, which I think looks kind of cool. Linked to risk. As we started to put together all our observations from the past decade, it became apparent to us that there was a strong link to risk. So we built a mechanism to link observations to our risks and embedded a process for this in our framework to better support this. This allowed us to better understand the likelihood and consequences of similar events and will be invaluable to us in the future development of some of our response plans. This clear link also allowed for the feedback of meaningful mitigations back into the risk register. Developing themes. We spent a significant amount of time identifying and developing themes, and we couldn't have done this without having all of the observations from the past in which to draw on. We then added in some sub-themes to get some more detail and granular analysis. This took a lot of time, this took a lot of revisions, and certainly a lot of waking up at 3 in the morning with a light bulb moment going, and then completely forgetting what that was when I would get up the next day. Piloting. We piloted the framework before we put it through our senior leadership team through a couple of post-incident reviews and exercises. This helped us to validate the framework in the development phase and helped us to identify where we had missed anything. collecting observations. We wanted to cast a very wide net. We wanted to be inclusive and have that approach when we collate observations, so we were prepared to take them from anywhere and everywhere, from incidences, exercises, workshop, right through to a portal we've developed where people can put in their lessons and their observations. We decided that in the initial phase, we would accept them in any format to make it more accessible and less scary. We would then go away and refine these observations and to align them within our framework. Peer reviewing. This is an important aspect for us. Because the lessons framework is new and because we are collecting observations in any format, we wanted a peer review process to ensure accuracy and to reduce bias. This process would allow consistency and ensure that observations are interpreted correctly. As our framework matures, so too will our approach to collating observations. Thought you gave me like a time there, but no, just waving at me, ideas. Insights. This is an art. As I also learned this morning from the workshop. Grouping observations. Spending time to develop the themes and the sub-themes made it easier to group observations. Some of our insights had numerous observations that moved into them, namely due to the varied formats and the time frame in which we'd received them. Along the way, we moved things around, we did lots of things just to kind of get it to a point where it was in a place that we wanted to be. And that was okay because it was all part of developing and refining the framework. Told a story. So for us, each insight set the scene and told a story. So we landed on a slightly varied approach to presenting insights, where we used very broad intuitive headings to provide clarity and cohesiveness. This made the insights more relatable and engaging, especially when we were presenting them for approval. Evolving process. We accept that our insights are an evolving process, and we will continuously improve as we receive more observations, and we are open to this because we know we aren't going to get it right the first time. Lessons identified. This did not happen overnight. It took me a while to get my head around the concept, how to word them. And then I remember someone saying, or I read somewhere, what is the lesson to learn? And this resonated with me and helped me to frame how I was going to do the wording. And when you get to this part, this is where the real work begins. So once you have your lessons identified, you need to assign a lead. Ideally, the person who is the SME in the particular area, and hope that they can squeeze it into their busy schedule. You need to work with that person to identify the actions, and this should not be done in isolation. Tap into the resources within your organisation, as we all can't be experts in everything. You need to assign realistic and achievable timeframes, as we can't do it all. You need to track the progress of those actions. This can be complex, especially when you are chasing multiple people for updates. And you need to be prepared to refine and reprioritise your actions. Measuring success. Once actions have been implemented, it is important to measure what success looks like. This is how we will determine when a lesson has become learnt. This is important to us due to the dynamic environment in which we work in. Is success for us when everything has been doing it, when everyone's doing it, or is it when 90% of our people are doing it? So we needed a good measure of success. And then just when you think all of this work's done, you've done all this great work, and you can actually say that some lessons have been learnt, they come back again and become lessons identified again. But we are expecting this. We need to be open to refining our actions, as not all will be effective in the long term. Lesson prioritisation. Balancing risk and capacity. We needed to prioritise our actions as we simply didn't have the capacity to implement them all overnight. We need to acknowledge that we can't do it all despite wanting to. So we decided the best approach to this was to prioritise based on risk. So we came up with some 3 prioritisation categories. High ones, where there was a significant risk or an opportunity for a major improvement. Medium, where there was a moderate risk that requires timely action. Low, where there is minimal risk and can be deferred if needed. Reporting. The initial report that we produced for our senior leadership team incorporated the insights and lessons identified over the past decade. This took a lot of time, but it was crucial for establishing a baseline for us. We presented the report earlier this month, and some 52 pages later, our senior leadership team seemed really happy with the report and the level of detail, although I'm not entirely confident that they all read it all line by line, but that's okay. Ongoing monitoring. Following the initial report, we needed to establish an ongoing monitoring program. We settled on implementing a quarterly reporting cycle to our senior leadership team. So our reports moving forward will identify any new insights and lessons identified that have emerged during the quarter. It will provide updates on lessons, actions that have not yet been implemented, and most importantly, it will show lessons that have become learnt, because it is really important that we celebrate these. Challenges. Nothing is easy. Implementing a lesson framework was extremely beneficial for us, but it did present some challenges along the way. Limited capacity. Like everyone, we have limited capacity, and this may impact our ability to progress lesson actions effectively. We needed to acknowledge this and know that we can't do it all at the same time. Resistance to change. This is inherent in most organisations. We needed to show that lessons were not just about focusing on what we were doing wrong, but more importantly about celebrating what we were doing well. We needed to remind people of the continuous improvement cycle and to bring them on the journey with us. Competing priorities. In emergency management, there is always something happening. There is always competing priorities. Whether it's in response mode, whether it's in BAU operations, a strategic project, or just whatever, there is always something to do. And these tasks always compete for attention and resourcing. We needed to make sure that we made lessons a priority for us. Duplication of effort. Along the way, you will find that there is duplication of effort and that actions are already well underway in other business units. Sometimes they're actually underway in 2 different business units, and we knew that this was going to happen. So we needed to ensure that we collaborated within our organisations and that we had a solid understanding of the wider organisational work plan. So where are we at now? So we collated our observations for the past decade. We've developed the big flash lessons management framework that has been approved by our senior leadership team. We have started to socialise the framework, because I'll talk about lessons to anyone who will talk to me about it. We've produced our first report, which has reflected those lessons from the past decade, and the next step for us is to formally implement the lessons management framework into our organisation. So how are we going to do this? We're going to go with a little bit of a soft launch approach. So we're going to embed our framework slowly, as we don't want to rush this. We will amend all our existing templates and gradually develop new ones to support the framework and to release them gradually. Lessons champions. We are going to appoint lessons champions throughout the country. These champions will help us to build awareness and support local engagement. Communication channels. We will formally communicate the lessons management framework through our existing communication channels. We're going to start with our managers, as we want to make sure that they have an understanding before rolling it out further. Next, we will communicate with our frontline staff to ensure that they are aware of the framework and the mechanisms in which they can provide observations outside of formal processes. Embedding change. Senior leadership. Our senior leadership team are going to be the key enablers for us to embed the lessons management framework throughout our organisation. Drive accountability. By assigning leads, we are encouraging personal ownership and we are driving that accountability. We will regularly follow up with the progress and offer support and guidance as required. Integrate lessons into daily practice. We know this is definitely going to take time, but we want to get to a point when sharing observations is a part of everyday practice. Impactful actions. We want to develop measurable and impactful actions that will enhance our operational performance. By being transparent with our lessons reporting, staff will begin to see the value add, and hopefully this will encourage them to embrace a lessons culture. Reflections. These are my personal reflections. So probably would have introduced this a lot earlier than what we did. We had a number of concurrent events and we could see that we had multiple priorities in terms of actions. If we'd introduced this framework earlier, this would have helped us to have had better visibility of reoccurring observations and would have helped us with prioritising our actions. Resource planning. I completely underestimated the amount of time it would take to put this framework together. Collating over a decade of observations, writing the initial report, it is not something that you can pick up and put down. It is something you've got to keep going at to keep that momentum and that consistency. I would probably have built in more dedicated time into my work plan for focus development earlier. If you can dedicate someone to this entirely, then I would strongly recommend you do, because it is well worth the investment. Implementation plan. This is probably something that I would have developed a little bit earlier. I have taken a little bit of an ad hoc approach, or possibly lazy, got sidetracked, but I was waiting for it to be approved first before we started looking at what that was, and I wish that I'd started that process a little bit earlier so we can move on with the implementation a little bit faster. My key reflection is to let go of perfect language. I spent way too long refining words, reading it 5 times, 10 times, passing it around. And in all honesty, I was probably completely overthinking it. So let go of that perfect language. So thank you for listening to my presentation. As I said in the beginning, I'm absolutely not an expert in this, but I did want to share my journey and hope that some of the stuff I've mentioned today has been helpful to those that are beginning theirs. Any questions? We'll do that next.
Well, no, we've got a couple of questions. In fact, quite a lineup of questions. And I've got to say, as an overthinker and a person who spends far too much time looking for the perfect words, I totally tautuku what you just said about that. It can drive you nuts. Look, we have got a lot of questions in the Slido. The most popular questions, actually, funnily enough, you answered in your last 3 slides.
Oh, cool.
So I'll go to what I hope is a reasonably simple one for you. Which software platform do you use to capture and track these lessons identified, or do you just rely on, say, an Excel spreadsheet, something like that?
Excel spreadsheet.
Oh, look at that.
Nothing
Hey,
flash.
didn't we all begin there?
Whatsoever.
Didn't we all begin there?
Excel spreadsheet entirely. That's where all the pretty colours and columns are.
Okay, and so here's another one. Did you have to, so talking about change management, when you're rolling out your lessons management framework, did you have to consider things like training? And obviously you talked about your comms channels and stuff like that. And how was it received by your people? You know, how's the culture with actually bringing you observations and being honest and transparent?
We're not quite there yet. That's part of our implementation plan. But as part of that, we are looking to develop some training packages that we will roll out with our operations managers first, and hopefully integrate that into exercises as well, just to kind of show the value add that it has. But if anyone's got some training ideas, come and see me later.
Ladies and gentlemen, Melanie Guthrie from Heitohoni St John Ambulance, thank you for a wonderful presentation. For those of you that have put questions into the Slido, Melanie will be, we're going to get a hold of Melanie and answer some of those questions online for you during the course of the afternoon. And of course you can find bios. That hit me hard and I'm on this side of the speaker, sorry. You can find the bios of all our wonderful presenters in your delegate handbook. So I'd like you to now please join me in welcoming our next speakers for today, Sana Verhoef and Chris Jacobson from Transport for New South Wales.
Thanks, Des. Before we begin, I would like to mihi to acknowledge the treaty partners in Aotearoa, New Zealand, We've been here now for 2 days and we've truly appreciated the beauty of this area and everything that it has to offer. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Jacobson. I'm the Manager of Capability in the Security, Crisis and Emergency Management branch within Transport. And in the capability team, we have a remit of lessons, exercises and training. And joining me today is Sana, and Sana's worked extensively across all three of these areas. Over the past 18 months, Transport for New South Wales has overcome a number of challenges to achieve significant growth in the lessons management space, which is a result of the huge benefits of our organisation. This has been due to a number of factors, but in particular, it's due to a series of executive crisis exercises that we've conducted, which has allowed us to apply and refine our lessons management approach. To share our experience, I'll begin by providing some context of Transport. Sana is then going to walk us through the exercises and demonstrate how we leverage these lessons to achieve significant successes. And then what we'll do is we'll provide you with a real-world example of how these achievements have been applied. We'll also explain how this success has led to the rapid growth of lessons management within our organisation, which has led to the current state of lessons management. Finally, we'll take you through the key elements that have enabled us to accomplish this in such a short period of time. So firstly, what we wanted to do was to provide you with some context and understanding of Transport for New South Wales and how we operate as a large, multimodal, statewide organisation. The main thing that we would like to emphasise here is just how big Transport is and how this creates a complex operating environment and a unique set of challenges. As you can see, we're split into many specific areas or functions, each with different priorities and their own remit and ways of working. We've got over 30,000 staff across 7 divisions, 5 operators and 3 secretary-led functions. So, as you can imagine, bringing these functions into alignment under unified governance is an extremely challenging task. It's a bit like trying to reroute peak hour traffic onto a single lane bridge. It's technically possible, but not without a lot of delays, detours and conflicting opinions on who has right of way. With that in mind, we now wanted to quickly show you what this means for incident, emergency and crisis management across Transport. Across the Transport sector, there are several incident coordination centres and levels of incident management teams. Teams have varied responsibilities and operating within divisions and modes of transport, managing numerous incidents daily and also responsible for attending various external, local, regional and state level committees and coordination centres. To provide a high-level overview, this illustration shows how all these functions interconnect. You can see here in the middle, highlighted in the dark blue, is the Transport Services functional area, responsible for Transport's responsibilities under the New South Wales State Emergency Management Plan. And within this, we have the Transport Emergency Crisis Coordination Hub, which aims to provide that centralised coordination of all these moving parts. And although that we've got all these structures in place, the sheer size and the difference in responsibilities and the processes makes centralised coordination very difficult. Similarly, with the team spread across the various parts of the business, so too will lessons management and these processes. These live within multiple teams, all using diverse approaches. And this is what's made it very hard for our branch to effectively capture and implement those lessons at an enterprise level. At this point in time last year, our branch was following an ad hoc approach to lessons, conducting after-action reviews and implementing improvements without a formal process in place. So, while we were learning and we were making improvements following these events, there certainly was not a unified and integrated approach across Transport, which left, as you would all know, missed opportunities for collective learning and improvement in this space. Which brings us to the exercises that we've mentioned earlier. I know Sana remembers this really clearly. Talk about being thrown in the deep end. We were given 6 weeks to plan and deliver an exercise for the most senior executives of Transport. Sana, take us through it.
Thanks, Chris. I absolutely do remember. This was definitely a very challenging but also extremely rewarding task. These exercises worked hand in hand with the development of our lessons management process, creating a symbiotic relationship. Together, they enabled us to implement measures that led to significant organisational improvements. In August of 2023, we were tasked with running one executive crisis management team exercise, which ultimately led to a series of 3. This was because the lessons management approach we applied was so effective in informing improvements that the updated processes needed further testing, refinement, and awareness. We designed each exercise to test a realistic crisis scenario based on the risk landscape at the time and set up an environment that enabled an accurate reflection of what would be expected from our executives in such circumstances. As I'm sure you can all appreciate, getting 16 of our most senior executives in one room to test unfamiliar territory is not something that we are often able to achieve. And therefore, we're keen to make sure that we make the most of this opportunity and extract as much understanding as possible on how we can streamline and improve our processes to ensure we are ready should a crisis eventuate. To do this, we developed and applied an interim lessons management process to facilitate the development of insights which informed corresponding recommendations, as well as to drive and track the implementation of these. And of course, we use the lessons identified to inform the subsequent exercises, particularly ensuring we communicated and tested the updated processes. So now to tell you a bit more about this, I will take you through each of the exercises and the progress that we made along the way. The first exercise we conducted was a polycrisis with an escalating scenario which tested extensive agency demand across multiple divisions and teams. It required an impact and risk assessment from all operator and divisional incident management teams, which then informed the desktop exercise that followed. The exercise was designed to determine whether our current doctrine and processes could effectively be followed to manage the overwhelming demands of the scenario. And from this, what we discovered was just how challenging it was to swiftly establish authority and accountability across multiple divisions and operators. As Chris mentioned, we operate across so many different functions, and all of a sudden having to take accountability for multiple unfamiliar teams is a tough task. Similarly, complications with quickly operationalising cross-functional activities, particularly finance and communications, were also highlighted. These teams needed to align swiftly for a streamlined, proactive, multimodal approach. However, the exercise made it clear just how difficult this was to achieve. Again, trying to reroute onto that single lane bridge that Chris referred to. We also identified that it was extremely difficult to separate tactical and strategic considerations and decisions to ensure we maximise the capability of our executive team. And lastly, the divisional incident management teams, particularly the ones who rarely activated, needed better guidance to facilitate this process. So, informed by these insights, we determined and took a number of actions to address the issues highlighted. We began by pinpointing the critical areas where the executive team would need to provide strategic direction. These were then integrated into the executive crisis management team's activation process as distinct work streams. Each workstream was assigned a specific executive member as the lead to ensure clear authority and accountability for any decisions made in that area. Then, to separate operational and strategic considerations, we established a new incident management layer called the Enterprise Incident Management Team. This team would essentially act as a conduit between tactical requirements and strategic priorities, maintaining enterprise-wide situational awareness and ensuring effective communication up and down the chain. For the cross-functional processes, finance and communication, we formed enterprise working groups, and these groups developed robust crisis-specific processes that could be implemented quickly during an emergency or crisis. And finally, we updated our doctrine to include additional guidance and templates for all the activation mechanisms, ensuring everyone had the necessary information. Now, having implemented these measures, we continued on our learning journey, eager to test if the new processes we had put in place were effective in addressing what we had hoped. The next exercise, a cybersecurity incident, once again tested divisional incident management teams and was again followed by an executive desktop exercise. The focus was on facilitating informed strategic decision-making and delegation to test whether the work streams, the assigned accountability, and the new enterprise incident management team could streamline the process to facilitate this. From the exercise, we gained some really positive insights, but of course, there is always room for improvement, particularly with new and unfamiliar processes. The more structured approach of using the work streams with the pre-identified leads was effective in facilitating rapid strategic decision-making for the identified areas, and it also provided a mechanism for ensuring the decisions were executed across the multiple teams and divisions. The Enterprise Incident Management team was able to coordinate effectively between tactical and strategic teams, keeping executives informed on operations and communicating strategic directions to the tactical teams. However, what we also realised was that the doctrine we were using, even the updated version, was no longer suitable to guide these processes. We were trying to update doctrine when we really needed a new framework, one that clearly defined the roles, escalation procedures, and interactions of all the incident management teams across the organisation. So that is exactly what we did. We started from scratch and we created a new Enterprise Incident Crisis Management Framework, integrating all levels of teams and their interconnectedness, as well as providing guidance, templates, and templates for rapid implementation. Having done this, we then got pretty confident that we were on the right track for streamlining enterprise-wide coordination. So of course, we decided to really put this to the test and add in an extra layer of complexity. Chris, we thought the first two exercises were hard, but we certainly took the third one to a whole new level.
That's right, Sana. Talk about going big. We sure don't do things half measure at Transport. Karen, our Executive Director, challenged us to go big, and that's exactly what we did. We went out and we found another large, complex organisation, this time from the private sector, with its own set of priorities, governance and processes. So that brings us to our third and final exercise. This one was conducted in collaboration with the Sydney Executive Crisis Management team, just to make sure that we weren't allowing our executives to stay within their comfort zones and to test if our new framework would be able to adapt to a diverse range of circumstances. It was a bit like planning an emergency drill on Christmas Eve at the Sydney airport. Ambitious, slightly chaotic, but somehow yet everything still managed to take off on time. And despite the added complexities, we're able to navigate this effectively. Our now robust, well-established and understood processes were flexible enough to adapt to the scenario requirements and the additional demands of working with a private enterprise. Transport's final post-exercise report is still in the final stages of approval, but essentially the exercise produced 4 themes, 13 insights and 4 recommendations, which will reinforce the unified governance across the organisation. Now, shifting the focus to align the divisional processes to the new Enterprise Incident and Crisis Management Framework, so that we're going in the same direction at the same time and not swiftly trying to merge our processes together at the last minute. Overall, the exercises, and especially the value added by the lessons management process, were highly successful in strengthening Transport's ability to coordinate effectively across a large and complex organisation. So, we've talked about the exercises and the lessons management that's come from that. But how did all this work in the real world? Well, ex-tropical cyclone Alfred happened, and the new framework was put into practice and stress tested within a real event. For this event, we implemented the framework that you can see. We activated all the incident management teams to provide impact and risk assessments. The impact and risk information provided was then consolidated by the enterprise management team, offering a comprehensive enterprise-wide overview to inform decisions regarding, facilitate unified coordination and to keep the executive team updated on the key issues and developments as they occurred. Additionally, the Enterprise Incident Management team utilised work streams and the work stream leads to ensure focused efforts in the key areas with appropriate authority, accountability and remit. Outside of the framework, the cross-functional processes that have been developed were also successfully followed. In fact, the Public Information Functional Area Coordinator, PIFAC, commended Transport's approach to its coordinated communications, and the Finance Incident Management team, not one involved in the day-to-day emergency management processes, came and requested an after-action review, now being fully on board to supporting the continuous improvement processes. Additionally, our after-action reviews have shown that these processes were incredibly valuable. Never before has there been such a comprehensive oversight of the entire enterprise, along with an awareness of the external implications from various stakeholders at multiple levels. All of our internal teams were able to reach in, access and understand the various sources of information and the implications. The after-action reviews have also indicated that there was sufficient guidance available to operationalise every level of the framework. So, we've just covered the exercises and how we apply this in the real world. But Sana, what was happening with lessons outside of the exercises?
Well, while we were achieving this success through the exercises, this success was also heavily influencing our processes outside of these, particularly as stakeholders were becoming aware of the achievements and benefits we were seeing from the process. Alongside the exercise, we had applied the interim lessons management process across the transport services functional area, and we had tailored it to suit the needs of the teams we were working with to ensure it could easily integrate into our distinct and varied ways of working and requirements. Again, the implementation was hugely successful. All of a sudden, we had numerous requests for data and lessons summaries, particularly to evidence decision-making, presentations and reports. Teams were also very eager to be part of the validation and tracking process, keen to help shape meaningful and viable courses of action and see them implemented. And we also began to receive an overwhelming number of requests to run after-action reviews and conduct other data collection methods from teams across transport. In fact, for ex-tropical cyclone Alfred, our branch has already run 8 after-action reviews, both within our branch and on request from other transport teams, with still more to come. Naturally, this sudden surge of demand, while incredible, brought with it some challenges. These were positive challenges stemming directly from the immense enthusiasm for lessons, but challenges nonetheless. Being such a small team within, as we have already mentioned, a huge organisation, our capacity versus demand was off kilter. However, we pushed through this to continue our work. We had some challenges with maintaining data integrity initially, with so much coming in and our data management processes still in infancy. Timely reporting was also a struggle, with everyone so keen to have the reports as quickly as possible to ensure they could start capitalising on the lessons, which was further impacted by the robust validation process we had put in place, making the process take a little bit longer to ensure those valuable and feasible courses of action. And lastly, the ongoing challenge of measuring the success of implementation. This is something that we are still working on, and while we certainly have seen improvements, as Chris has already demonstrated, the measuring of when a lesson is learned is not something we currently have a process for. But this is something very much on our radar and will be incorporated into our Enterprise Lessons Management Standard. Which brings us to our next slide, our current state of lessons management. We are currently in the process of developing an enterprise-wide lessons management standard along with the supporting resources to unify governance and processes across the entire organisation. Having this in place will, hopefully, enable us to share lessons data across all of transport and ensure we are all able to benefit from this shared information. We saw firsthand the value of understanding the issues encountered by different teams through the after-action reviews we conducted following ex-tropical cyclone Alfred. This allowed us to paint a holistic picture of the event and all aspects of our role within this. The insights gained from these reviews were valuable not only for informing lessons for individual teams or divisions, but also for contributing to our overall understanding as one organisation. With this new standard, we will now be able to apply the lessons management approach at that enterprise level, forming holistic lessons and assigning these to any and all teams across transport. So, as you can probably tell, we are very proud of what we have been able to achieve in this space over the last year. And lastly, just before I hand back over to Chris to wrap up, I would like to highlight a few key elements that were crucial to our success. Firstly, collaborative implementation, partnering with the relevant teams to ensure all lessons were sense-checked, validated and feasible before finalising and assigning helped to ensure the ongoing commitment to these. Accessible leadership, having direct access to leaders over the last year, has been integral to us quickly getting the approvals we needed to ensure we could move at such a fast pace. Creating awareness of lessons management. It honestly feels like we have been on a 12-month roadshow with lessons. We have been plugging all aspects of the process and our successes at every opportunity. And you can really see that once people understand the process better, they believe in it a lot more. Practical application and refinement, as we have already mentioned, by refining the process through its practical application, this has allowed us to make the process work for us rather than trying to fit into a process. Senior leadership buy-in, of course, working with our most senior executives for the exercise gave us huge buy-in into the process, which was incredibly valuable for getting others on board as well, even though this was essentially creating more work for everyone. Culture of learning. We really just wanted to call out here that Transport truly does have a culture of learning, which has made our job for facilitating data collection and continuous improvement activities a lot easier. And lastly, the state and national communities of practice within the lesson space cannot go unnoticed. These have been absolutely fundamental to our rapid progress. The resources, expertise and templates we access through these groups have given us a significant head start, which has allowed us to keep up with the sudden demand that we have been experiencing. So, all of these lessons, as well as a whole lot of hard work, have been the catalyst for our success. And with that said, Chris, I think it's time you summarise the key takeaways from our presentation today.
Thanks, Anna. Yes, it has been hard work, but the past year has really been one of learning, growth and change. We've seen the immense benefits of a thoughtful, collaborative and consistent approach to lessons management. Over the last 12 months, our lessons management process has significantly evolved, which is through the fruition of the work done over this time. And this has connected us better across the organisation, improved our ways of working, and continues to foster a culture of continuous improvement. We have achieved two key milestones worth calling out. One, a unified enterprise-wide approach to incident and crisis management. And two, an enterprise lessons management standard, which will see us continue to keep improving in this area. What has truly stood out for us is that progress doesn't come from getting everything right the first time. It comes from showing up, testing ideas, listening and adapting. You can't create something in isolation and hope that it will all work. You need to engage and apply. We need to share both the good and the bad so that we can learn. If everything goes right, you learn nothing. We're proud of how far we've come as an organisation, and we're even more excited about what we can achieve as we move forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Sana and Chris, for a fantastic presentation. We've got, you've just about broken Slido with the amount of questions that we had and reactions, and I must immediately go to my personal favourite was, are you immediately available for a secondment to the New Zealand Public Service? So obviously people really resonating with your presentation and what you're doing. So just a couple of questions. How did you go about designing a scenario that tested executive roles, things like communicating for influence or leading in complex and dynamic circumstances?
You go.
Well, it was really, really hard. Basically, we just really tried to get into the heads of the executives and what would really, really happen in that scenario. So first we did a lot of research about the specific crisis that we had decided to exercise, what it looked like against the doctrine we had at that point in time, and then we just tried to read the minds of the executives to see what they would do.
Good luck. With respect, of course, to all the executives in the room. And what resources did you draw on to design and deliver the exercises?
Well, we basically just did a whole lot of research around the specific crisis and everything that we had within the organisation that we would draw on for the exercise. So we actually didn't really use any resources specifically. We used vague templates of exercises that had been delivered in the past, but we kind of started from scratch from this one because we hadn't done it before, to be honest.
Okay, so thinking about what systems you use to manage data, how have you captured your lessons? So via surveys, interviews, after action review?
Yeah, we do all of that. I mean, we've kind of just took off with everything. We do surveys, we do after action reviews. From recent ex-tropical cyclone Alfred, we have realised that working with a lot of teams across transport that are unfamiliar with lessons management, that it's probably better to do smaller interviews and kind of get them used to providing observations and the information that we need. But yeah, so with our data collection, we've just tried to use as many avenues as possible so that we're allowing everyone to provide the data that we need.
Fantastic. So did the addition of the enterprise IMT in crisis management add layers of chaos or calm?
What we found was it actually worked really well. Before we had the process in place, we had some uncertainty in terms of the remit and accountability, but by putting it in place, and particularly with what we saw with ex-cyclone tropical Alfred, we could see that probably there was a lot of calm, stability, and everyone knew what they had to do within their own area. So it's certainly something that there's some slight tweaks that we would make to that process, but we really found it to be a really good framework that we've come up with.
Okay, so outside of exercises, what do you think made your implementation approach a success? Did you take a particular approach? Any tips?
There we go. Yeah. Look, there was a number of things. I suppose the exercises were critical in the sense of it allowed that senior leadership buy-in. But in terms of outside that, there was really the consultation. So it was really about sitting and talking and understanding and selling the concepts of why we're doing certain things. And when we've got the evidence and the data that's backed up, particularly of those observations, it's really easy to sell something. So by going back and relating to those and then starting to put our processes and our frameworks in place, it was backed by that evidence, which meant that we could make some really good informed decisions.
No, that's great. And that, as you say, that informs the decision-making process. But does your department do anything in particular to cultivate a learning culture? So at the grassroots, I guess.
I mean, we do it as an organisation, yeah.
Yeah, as an organisation, in answer to that, we do. There is a very big focus within our branch of transport around that learning culture and continuous improvement, and that's something that we're really trying to drive home and continue to do in not only just the lessons and the exercises, but in that training space. And we've adapted our training programs very much as a result of the exercises and the lessons management process to ensure that we're training people and giving them the right skill set and the knowledge and also that continuous improvement to what they might need to know and how they can continue to perform in the roles that they're undertaking.
Now, well, look, thanks, Chris and Sana, an absolutely fabulous presentation that's been really well received. We've still got quite a few questions in Slido, and our events team, I think, will collar you over the next little while to address some answers for those online and those of you in the room that have put questions into Slido. So, ladies and gentlemen, Chris and Sana, Transport for New South Wales. It is my incredible pleasure now to welcome up to the stage my good friend Sandra Alicini and Loretta Wingfield for their presentation on what they're doing at 000 Victoria.
Thank you, Des. Good afternoon all. Thank you for having us here today. We're thrilled to be here with you. I'm Sandra Elisiani, Senior Manager of Outcomes and Evaluation at 000 Victoria, and I'm joined here today by my colleague Loretta Wingfield, who's the Senior Policy and Project Officer in our team. So today we'll be talking with you about our experience growing 000 Victoria's lessons management capability and how we're making a really conscious effort to focus on capability building and culture building across our organisation. Before we get started though, we'd like to share a little bit about our 000 Victoria organisation and the 000 process in Australia. So at 000 Victoria, we operate with a centralised call taking and dispatch model for our emergency services. This may vary in terms of how that operates from states and territories across the country. But in Victoria, we have 3 state emergency communications centres. There are approximately 1,200 full-time equivalent staff at those centres, and of those, 894 operational employees performing our call taking and dispatch services. As you can appreciate, as people working in emergency services, we're getting increasingly busier. In our 2023-24 financial year, we answered 2.9 million calls for assistance, and that represents a call every 10.9 seconds. No matter where you are in Australia, when you call 000, you first speak to a Telstra 000 operator before they transfer you to their respective state or territory agency. In Victoria, this diagram illustrates the 000 process. So the call is transferred to a call taker to gather information, which is then shared with a dispatcher who dispatches the appropriate emergency service. That dispatcher also works to provide ongoing event management support for our emergency services organisation while resources are deployed. It's also important to understand the journey that our organisation has been on. So pre-1995, emergency service organisations, they were all responsible for their respective emergency call taking and dispatch services. Then in 1995, Victorian Emergency Communications were privatised and US company Intergraph Public Safety took over. In 2002, the Victorian Government resumed responsibility for Victorian Emergency Communications, replacing Intergraph with Emergency Communications Victoria. Then in 2004, we evolved again to Emergency Services Telecommunications Authority, and some of you might better know that organisation as ESTA. We continued as ESTA for the next 19 years. ESTA experienced unprecedented demand due to COVID-19, and the organisation was subject to numerous reviews and inquiries. In 2021, the ESTA Capability and Service Review, otherwise known as the Ashton Review, was announced publicly. And this brings us to our current state as 000 Victoria. Our new Act, 000 Victoria Act 2023, was enacted in December 2023 and included new legislative responsibilities and being clearly defined as an emergency services organisation. And you might be wondering, why does all of this matter? Why is this relevant in the context of lessons management? And in the words of Liana, our keynote speaker earlier, the past is prologue. I'm going to take that one with me. I really like that. All of this change has influenced the cultural imprint of our organisation, and that influences how we operate, how we engage with our partners, and how we implement change, including lessons management. As I mentioned, during 2021-2022, COVID drove unprecedented demand, impacting our services, like many other emergency services and frontline organisations. Surges in community demand through COVID outbreaks, combined with staff illness, furloughing, reduced our ability to deliver timely services to the community, which had some really devastating impacts. While this impact to service delivery led to decreased confidence by stakeholders, including community members and our service delivery partners. Then ESTA was subject to significant scrutiny by the media and the public. While our people were doing their absolute best in these incredibly trying circumstances, it was clear that there were parts of ESTA as an organisation that really needed to change. And what has followed has been a period of significant organisational reform driven by the Ashton Review. The reform program was established to boost call taking and dispatch capacity, bring us closer to government as we were somewhat disconnected, upgrade systems, build better surge capacity, and most importantly, strengthen wellbeing supports for our people. I'll pass to Loretta now, who will provide us with the overview about our lessons management project.
Thank you, Sandra. So the Ashton Review identified that our knowledge management capability was low at the time of the report and that we were disconnected from national and state initiatives. It stated reforms should strengthen and embed a continuous improvement mechanism across our call taking and dispatch function. While work had commenced to address this issue, the Lessons Management Project was established to equip the recommendation and improve our lessons management maturity, alignment with government and connection with partner agencies. The project had 4 key deliverables, which included the Lessons Management Framework, a cultural and capability uplift, sector engagement and sharing, and identifying a technical solution to home our lessons management lifecycle. Before it gets asked in the questions, we haven't worked that out yet. We're still with Excel, as you can all appreciate. And today, we'll be focusing on our cultural and capability uplift. But it's important for us to note that this work was funded through an Australian government grant in partnerships with states and territories under the National Partnership Agreement for Disaster Risk Reduction. And it's really important for you guys to also think about grant opportunities. It took us a few goes to secure the funding, which we're very, very grateful for, but highly recommend thinking about it because it was critical for us to be able to deliver this project. So when approaching the project, we took 5 key steps, and we'll go over them in detail over the next few slides. So firstly, we focused on generating organisational buy-in to foster a strong authorising environment. We aligned our lessons management framework and methodology with national and state arrangements. I think that's a polite way of saying that we plagiarised with support of our network. We collaborated early and consistently with our agency partners throughout the project to ensure that our work mirrored the sector. We established a culture and engagement plan outlining activities and workshops for our stakeholders. And we established, possibly my favourite part, the Lessons Management Network to support the implementation of the project as well. So speaking to the first one, a strong authorising environment was critical to driving change. And due to the Lessons Management Project's relationship with the Ashton Review, we actually use the Reform Project Control Group as our governance forum to make sure that we continue to have the same executive buy-in and understanding of the intent of the Lessons Management Project. That group is made of executive directors from each department as well as strategic operational representatives. We have also included the Lessons Management Project in our corporate planning in all of our frameworks, strategic frameworks, to make sure that, again, we've got that operational buy-in and understanding of prioritisation. So it's a strategic initiative within our trusted partnerships that drive performance in our draft strategic plan for 2024 to 2027. It's a key indicator in our outcomes framework under our People Make a Difference domain. It's a key deliverable of our continuous improvement and capability action in our draft corporate plan for 2024 and 2025. It's an action in our enterprise culture action plan to support continuous improvement and organisational learning. That all sounds like a lot, but we'll come back to why that's important in a bit. So again, in alignment with the Ashton Review, we strongly focused on connecting 000 Victoria to national and state arrangements. We linked our lessons management framework to the Australian Institute for Disaster Resilience Lessons Management Handbook and Emergency Management Victoria's Lessons Management framework. This ensured that our framework reflected the sector. We used the same methodology, terminology, whilst keeping it nuanced enough to reflect our function for our organisation. What I find very important as well is that our framework also outlines our responsibility within our state emergency management plan. So again, keeping that linkage to our emergency management arrangements and state arrangements, where we have two key activities, one being to capture observations and insights during and after emergency events to inform preparedness for and response to future events, and participate in sector learning and insurance activities. This ensured our workforce understood our role in the sector and why it's important to provide quality contributions and improvement activities internally and externally. So through this alignment with the sector, it means we were able to collaborate closely with our emergency service partners. We held meetings with our partners to understand their experience with implementing lessons management at their respective workplaces. And it was through this that agencies were able to highlight for us, again, the importance of a strong authorising environment, the relationship between risk management and lessons management, which is becoming a growing theme across the sector, using limited resources effectively, again, something that we can all appreciate, and cultivating a learning culture from the outset. This told us that we were heading in the right direction with our approach. One of the key insights echoed by the agencies was the challenge of maintaining a baseline capability and creating an environment where people felt comfortable to share their experiences and observations. Agencies found through training varying levels of responders, from recruits to senior leaders, it meant that lessons management capability was modelled at all levels, showing the required vulnerability to share and the importance of not placing blame on one another, so really talking to that just culture. Similarly, the agencies advise that when building a lessons management culture, that it's important to speak the same language as your audience. For example, they found the best way to generate executive buy-in was to align their lessons management to their risk management frameworks, which is well practiced by their organisational leaders. So walk in the same walk. This brings us to our lessons management framework. It was informed by our engagement. It reflects our learnings, our lessons management life cycle. It speaks to the OIL methodology, defines our governance process, as well as policy ownership and our risk management. It actually links to our risk management enterprise framework. So again, having that linkage across the organisation. But a bit different to others, it places a responsibility on departments to implement lessons management and encourages them to use existing governance mechanisms for escalation whilst leveraging existing good practice. Importantly, however, the lessons management framework homes our cultural characteristics. I'll hand to Sandra now to talk through our culture and capability uplift in more detail.
Thanks, Loretta. So as we may know in this room, establishing a learning culture is at the heart of lessons management. So we can establish as many processes as we want, but if we don't have that learning culture, the learning is going to be limited. This is why it was important for us that our internal lessons management stakeholders were able to design our cultural characteristics which underpin our framework. You can see those cultural characteristics on the outside of our lessons management process diagram. All of these cultural characteristics ultimately work towards establishing a just culture. So our cultural characteristics, as defined by our internal stakeholders, were transparent. Transparency ensures that people are made aware of the outcome of their contributions and enables expectations to be managed. This was particularly important for our people who wanted to ensure that their generous sharing of their experiences during events or projects or whatever it is aren't being lost in the organisation. Accountable. Accountability ensures that we know the allocation of and responsibility for prioritising actions through to implementation. Psychological safety. So it's important that everyone feels that they can provide observations openly without fear of retribution or judgment. Learning activities should always support staff wellbeing over information gathering. This is particularly important for our organisation when we reflect back on the reform journey that we've been on, and particularly the level of scrutiny the organisation's been through in recent times. And the last one is inclusive. I think that was mentioned in an earlier presentation as well. So I'm starting to pull some threads of themes in this forum already, and we're only at day one. Regularly and deliberately utilising individual teams' skills through working together. So focusing on cross-function collaboration to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to contribute. Safe and inclusive environments and practices encourage everyone's participation in lessons management processes. To be able to deliver against our framework and a project, we developed a capability and engagement plan to focus on our cultural and capability uplift for the organisation. This slide up here illustrates the journey we've been on and will continue to be on into the future. In November 2004, we established what we've called our Lessons Management Network. It's an internal network of senior representatives from across 000 Victoria who will champion lessons management across the org. In December 2024, we delivered our first lessons management introductory sessions, and these were particularly important for those who were new to the concepts. Through December to February of this year, we co-facilitated with Emergency Management Victoria their lessons management debrief training, which was a compulsory requirement for being part of the network. In March, we've facilitated a guest speaker panel so that we could encourage the network to draw on the extensive experience of our sector partners. And that panel featured the famous Heather Stewart, and that panel was really well received by the Lessons Management Network. And part of that is bringing, external perspectives into the organisation and being able to share that with people who may not always be exposed to those external networking opportunities. Now we're in the process of delivering implementation and culture workshops across the organisation. We'll help the teams to identify what their learning cultures are within their respective teams and develop an implementation plan in terms of what lessons management will look like in their respective teams and departments. I should mention at this point that we have not designed any of this content ourselves. We have borrowed from the sector, from the people in this room, from people across the country, and we've adapted all of that information. So none of this has been created from scratch, and I encourage everyone to do the same. So about our Lessons Management Network, it's currently comprised of 45 operational and support senior leaders across our organisation, people who have a passion for continuous improvement, and they were nominated by their executive leaders. The project team regularly sends out updates to this network to keep the network appraised of upcoming opportunities and developments in lessons management. And now that we're moving into implementation phase and planning, we'll move to a regular schedule of network meetings to really establish that community of practice. The objective of the network is really to give leaders across the organisation a chance to have a shared sense of purpose and community for continuous improvement. We've developed a purpose statement for the network. Thank you.
Oh no, it's not changing. Okay.
Having some technical difficulties. That's okay, I've got some slides I prepared earlier. I'm happy to continue to speak to them. Oh, there we are. We may jump a few slides ahead if it catches up. Let me know if that happens.
Oh, yeah.
It's operating on Australia time, we're a bit behind. So.
In New Zealand, we say we've got a taniwha in the system.
A taniwha?
Yeah, the taniwha.
Oh yeah, no, we've really sent it. Just a peek, just a preview.
Lessons management purpose statement, please.
This is very you and I. That one.
Ta-da,
Thank you.
and we've arrived. That was all part of building some anticipation for what that purpose statement is, and I know that you're all dying to know. The purpose of the Lessons Management Network is to promote a learning culture within 000 Victoria for the continuous improvement of our services to community. We'll work together to build our lessons management capability and to embed the lessons management framework across the organisation. We commit to curiosity, the sharing of knowledge, and being better together. And that last bit, the being better together, links into our organisational values. Network members attended a full day of lessons management debrief training, which I mentioned earlier. And that was co-facilitated by 000 Victoria and Emergency Management Victoria. This training was developed by Emergency Management Victoria. As I said earlier, we borrowed as much as we could. And what we've done is adapted that for our context to make it relevant to our people. The training covered lessons management concepts, definitions, processes, and align with our lessons management framework, as well as the state and national arrangements. The objective was to equip participants with knowledge on how to plan and facilitate a debrief, how to use the OIL methodology, capture observations, and provide psychologically safe environments. It's also provided a high-level understanding of those state and national arrangements. You can see on the slide, there's some feedback shared from our lessons debrief training participants. However, one of my favourite reflections from a participant was that they came away from it reflecting on their historical contributions to lessons management processes and having a real aha moment in terms of thinking about how do I share my observations in a way that is useful for lessons to be identified. And I thought that that was really powerful because it was a moment where this person had reflected on what their process, their contribution is in that lessons process. They might not be a lessons manager, they might be just sharing their experience, but it's enabled them to reflect on, well, what am I bringing to that process and how do I make that meaningful and useful? So the project team, that's us, one and a half people. We're at the point of delivering our implementation and culture workshops across the organisation. The workshops provide teams with an opportunity to reflect on their learning culture and also to develop a tailored implementation plan that's unique to their function. We want to give teams a real sense of ownership over lessons management in their area and limit the feeling of lessons management being done to them. We want them to help them identify what they're currently doing well and how that can be adapted and fit into the lessons management cycle. So what have we learned? So just like any project, ours has faced several challenges along the way. If I was to do a meta-analysis of every project or program evaluation I've ever done, you would see these themes repeated time and time again, and I'm sure that they probably feel quite familiar to people in this room. We were challenged by the current fiscal environment, as many in this room can probably appreciate. It's a tough time. We were assisted by the fact that we had secured the grant, and that was a big advantage for us. Over the past year, there's been countless organisational restructures that have obviously have flow-on effects. Operational demands will be familiar to people in this room. Changing internal governance arrangements. So we've had to adapt and be flexible to ensure that we're getting approvals through the right processes, and that's caused some delays. Resourcing and competing priorities for the project team being us. We've had numerous competing things being delivered. Having the grant has also assisted with that because we have defined timelines that we've had to meet. So it's enabled the organisation to maintain a focus on the deliverables for lessons management, which is good. And we had an ambitious schedule for delivery. The grant was for a year and, we planned to deliver a lot in that year. And we've managed to do most of it. Our partners did warn us though that it was ambitious, and we did say that we would be back to share the lessons of that ambition at a later date. So here we are. Over to you, Laura, for more lessons.
I can see that we're about to get wrapped, so I'll be speedy, I promise. So we'll just close off with what we've learned, and I'll do a quick summary. So we learnt that it's critical to build that trust and credibility, and that's what we did by trying to explain to them as well the global lessons management landscape. So exactly like we heard this morning from Liana about the UK Resilience Academy, because it was clear to us in our early stages of engagement that our stakeholders had a varying range of understanding of lessons management, from no idea at all to having done it before. So it was really important to us that they understood that this was a practice that was being used globally. It wasn't just another organisational buzzword. And we established that credibility through getting it into all our corporate framework and strategic documents. So again, our strategic plan, our corporate plan, our culture plan, this enabled them to be able to use those documents as reference to prioritise the work when it does come to them. Further to this, we learnt that it's really important for our lessons management network and internal stakeholders to engage with the sector themselves. So rather than us doing it on their behalf, we've actually been able to send out some network participants into sector opportunities brought to them from the state review team, including Emergency Management Victoria's program review in March, Victorian Transport Department of Transport's Exercise East End in April, the multi-agency Grampians region debrief in May, as well as another upcoming exercise in June. And this links back to the Ashton review and making sure that we're connected to national and state arrangements. And I promise, this is my very last slide, and it finishes with a lovely cliche, that lessons management is about the journey. It's never a destination, it's never completed. We're being very, very conscious to take a maturity approach when implementing lessons management to make sure we can walk before we run. And this was informed by our ongoing project evaluation. And our next 12 months looks like maintaining momentum with the lessons management network and executive, where we'll plan to have a plan on our engagement strategy and different types of capability exercises, continuing to facilitate our implementation and culture workshops, as well as supporting their activities on a day-to-day basis, and continuing to reflect on the effectiveness of our model. And we'll take learnings from our project evaluation in the spirit of lessons management and continue to improve. And that's the end, very close to our time. I am conscious, but thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Loretta and Sandra. Unfortunately, we did go into question time, but we've got a few good questions on the Slido, and we'll grab you a little later to get on and answer those for our folk in the room and online. So thank you, Sandra and Loretta. So time marches on for us this afternoon, and it's now my great pleasure to invite Emma Conway from AFAC up to do her presentation. Welcome, Emma.
Good afternoon, everyone. Here I was thinking I was terribly organised and closed a file that I needed, which was very foolish of me. Everyone, my name is Emma Conway. I'm the Deputy Director of Operations for AFAC. My responsibilities include the operational collaboration groups supported by your agencies, as well as the National Resource Sharing Centre, which is where my lessons journey comes from that I'll be talking to today. So a little bit about me. Prior to joining AFAC approximately 12 months ago, I worked for Country Fire Authority in Victoria, working my way up from the fire stations to managing a CFA district over a period of 17 years. And in that time, I've seen the lessons management journey of CFA, and I've certainly experienced many after action reviews, some done exceptionally and some maybe not so much. So I like to think I've taken all those experiences and brought them to AFAC as part of my journey. In my AFAC role, in that 12-month period, I've deployed just over 1,800 personnel across 12 separate deployments, both internationally and interstate. And it's a lot. And I think a lot of the conversations you would have had here today indicate that the operational tempo that our agencies are grappling with is very steadily and in some cases quite rapidly increasing. And we need to make sure that we have the processes in place to make sure that every time we come back, we do it a little bit better. Haha, success. So the introduction of the after action review process formalised and enhanced the experiential learning process. In the case of international deployments, we manage a very complex system of processes and procedures, bringing together multiple agencies' structures and trying to integrate them into an international workspace. The deployments can be challenging and require a significant level of trust, not just amongst the coordinating authorities like NRSC, but also amongst the members of these different agencies coming together for the first time on foreign soil to deal with significant events. A great deal of work goes on behind the scenes. By making lessons management a priority, we acknowledge the experience of our members. And we seek to improve that experience for future deployments, as well as increase the value of the deployments for the host country. Traditionally military, and in many cases our agencies, focus AARs on actions and their outcomes. NRSC is a coordinating authority. We don't own or control any of the resources that we deploy. So this makes our partnerships even more critical. This means that when NRSC leads an after-action review into international or interstate deployments, we focus on what we have the responsibility for, which are the systems and the processes that our agencies use to operate these deployments. And this requires a slightly different take on the traditional after-action review process. So, arrangements have always been in place amongst agencies to support cross-border deployment, and those informal arrangements over time have become more formal memorandum of understandings that allow the agencies to, we won't say seamlessly, but enthusiastically support each other across the borders. In 1994, significant fires occurred in New South Wales, and this prompted the first coordinated multi-state deployment. In 2000, severe fires burnt across the United States. Australia offered support which was accepted, and the first formal international deployment occurred. In 2016, the AFAC National Resource Sharing Centre was formalised. Initially, it was staffed by agencies who were seconded as part of the deployment to support the deployment through the NRSC process. Over time, however, we've come to understand that the work of maintaining the agreements, the operating plans, the coordinating strategies, and the support of the more prolonged, concurrent and complex deployments means that we need permanent staff. And we currently now have 5 supporting the National Resource Sharing Centre, along with other enthusiastic AFAC staff who put their hand up to be part of my duty team. Now, NRSC coordinates interstate deployments of fire and severe weather events across Australia and New Zealand. This includes personnel and equipment supporting bushfire response, flood response, storm recovery, and specialist capabilities such as rescue and hazmat. We have responsibility for deploying bushfire capability internationally. And this will be interesting, my computer battery's just died. Let's see how I can wing it. So we deploy resources internationally. We supply bushfire capability only into the international space. Other capability is provided by the Australian Federal Government through their various international arrangements. Over time, NRSC has progressed and developed, and we now have very strong partnerships both with Canada and the US, and we are regularly deploying across the border. So the latest, or the most recent time that we've imported capability was in 2019-2020 to support the Australian fires, but over the last 20 years of international deployments, we've deployed to both Canada and the US 8 times each, of approximately 2,400-ish personnel in those 20 years. Just over 1,000 of them have been in the last 2 years. So we can see a significant increase in the workload of NRSC through that international resource sharing. So the 2024 deployment, which is where my story comes from, comes off the back of not the worst seasons that Canada and the US have ever seen, but certainly significant ones. So Canada experienced approximately 5,000 wildfires burning just over 5 million hectares in 2024. It was their second worst season in decades. Obviously, 2023 was their most recent big one. The US had 39,800-ish wildfires in 2024, 7,700,000 and something acres burnt in that period. Again, not their worst fire, but about 1 million acres above their 10-year average for wildfire. So through their requests on the 10th of July, Canada put their first request in. We sent 383 personnel, some of whom are sitting in the room, across, and we did that over a period of 9 weeks. So the event ramped up very quickly. And again, while it's not our biggest deployment, a significant number of people deployed in a very short period of time. So that was the 10th of July. On the 24th of July, the US reached out and said, we need 165 fireground management positions filled by Australia, please. And we said, we can give you 70. So 70 got on a plane and went and did the work. What we're finding is that over time, we're recognising that the development of incident management capability, and this is my little soapbox and you'll excuse me for 2 seconds, the development of incident management capability is not just a local issue. It's a global issue. And the development of those pipelines to allow our people to get the experience, to get the training, to get the knowledge, to take on these incredibly complex senior incident management roles is essential. And we need to have a global view on developing that. So, the scale of an international deployment. A lot of work goes on behind the scenes to make one of these deployments work. So you have the deployees themselves who, when they get the tap on the shoulder, have a very short period of time to get themselves to a point where they can leave safely. And this includes preparedness training, briefings, material that we throw at them to try and get their heads around it while they're trying to pack their life up for months to be able to go and do this deployment. We also have the NRSC team, which involves the staff, the duty team, and we work very closely with the resource managers group, who are members of your agency who have been tapped on the shoulder to work directly with us. So we work on a structure where the Commissioner and Chief Officer's Strategic Committee, which are our senior leaders of our agencies, provide the tasking and the direction for NRSC. The resource management group sits within your agencies directly supporting us to tap into your resources, and we have the systems and the processes that support those deployments. We build them in partnership with your agencies. We build them in partnership with the other coordinating authorities, which are the Canadian and the US families. So to make this work, we have the systems and the processes. And these are the operating plans, the operating procedures, the standard operating procedures, the tracking systems, and all those briefings, deployment preparation that goes into these deployments. When we come to do an after-action review of this, it's not a single piece that we're testing. What we need to assess is the success or not of the entire system. So what we found is that while previous after-action reviews didn't not work, we still made progress. What we found was that they didn't necessarily target the piece that NRSC could directly influence. So we looked at addressing that. In the 2024 after-action review process, we conducted 6 individual after-action reviews of the different groups that formed our deployments. So these were our deployed members. These were our in-country leadership personnel. These were the NRSC staff, NRSC duty team, the resource managers group, and the coordinating authorities. And while the after-action reviews were targeted at those specific groups, what we found was that by isolating those groups and talking about how they interacted with their systems at their level, while there are definitely pros and cons, and it meant that we weren't able to provide everyone the big picture about what everyone else was doing in the process at the same time, it did allow us to see and understand how the different members of the different agencies interacted with those processes and systems. And that was really positive learning for us. So just go back to a traditional after-action review process, and I've got to stay with the microphone so the people online can hear me, which means I can't wander up and down the stage. So we talk about what was supposed to happen, what did happen, what worked, what didn't work. And again, when we're talking about a particular action, that's really useful. And you can see everyone's part in it, and you can understand how that action went from start to finish. When we're talking about a process and when we're dealing with systems, what we found is that we needed to focus more on the personal interaction with those systems, because what that gave us was a far better understanding of how those systems affected the individuals themselves. Because a system can work and still be painful to operate, or people can understand the system and still not be able to use it. So it was very much about understanding the people side of the interaction with those systems. So the first thing about expectations versus experiences. What we found when we asked our team members, what were your expectations, especially when we were talking to the in-country leadership and the resource management group and my staff, we got the really basic things like, I'm going to be really busy. I'm going to be working with lots of different people. And I went, okay, that's fine. We're just going to stay here for a little bit until you start to give me the good stuff. What we found when we incorporated their expectations versus their actual experiences, we found that we had made, and by we it was a collective we, a lot of assumptions. NRSE had made a lot of assumptions about the underlying knowledge that our resource management group had about their roles and responsibilities, for example. And I'm sure your departments and your agencies would experience. Staff churn means that you don't have a lot of corporate knowledge left in these positions as people rotate through them. Unless you have a really strong handover about, hey, and you know, here's your job as the manager of operations or the state operations director for your agency, and by the way, you've just got to be part of the resource management group over here and you'll be fine. There's a whole nother set of processes, procedures, documents, systems that these members need to be aware of that we found hadn't been passed on. Not maliciously, it was just through the churn, through the speed, and through our assumptions because of the churn in our organisation, we hadn't picked up on. And while in this particular case, we didn't have any adverse consequences because of that, through this after-action review process, sitting with this piece around experiences and expectations, we uncovered a whole range of improvements that could be made through NRSC's processes, through the agency's handover processes, and through how we distribute our doctrine that will allow the next generation of people sitting in those roles to feel far more comfortable and be far more effective when they're exercising them. So that was the first thing. The other thing we found when we sat with this space was that once people were comfortable with the discomfort of having to do a deep dive around, you know, what their expectations were, we found that the flow of the conversation started to be really constructive, and they started to open up about their level of comfort about doing the role, about what they wished they'd known when they went into it. And that started to prompt how they thought they could do it better, which meant, of course, your facilitator, who has to be exceptional when you run these, had to rein it in a little bit so we didn't go down the rabbit hole. The next stage of our after-action review that we focused on was what we were already doing well. And I think it's one of the key things in the after-action review process that would provide agencies a whole lot of value if we could sit with it enough for people to actually get serious about teasing it out. NRSC and the international deployments work well, and they've worked well over a long period of time. There is nothing in that system that is broken. And that's one of the things that a lot of people, especially new managers, when they come in, and I've had a bit of experience with this going, oh, you know, training's broken or this is broken, and all the people who are sitting there trying to keep the system going just crumple inside. So it's not broken. It's an opportunity to develop and evolve and recognise that our environment is also evolving and we need to keep our systems and processes moving with it. So celebrate what works. Also be really conscious about what works, because when you start talking about what can be improved, if you don't hang on to what's already of value, it can sometimes be inadvertently swept away by the next round of changes. So hanging on to those successes and those wins not only helps your team feel confident about the fact that even with all the failures and the things that they've found that could have been done better, the system worked and we got the job done. So this is everyone's favourite bit. When people come to an after-action review, they generally come with a list of things that worked well that is this big and a list of things that didn't that is that big, which is great. It means that people have actually taken the time to think about how things could be improved. So winning already. What we had to do then was try and help people understand where their responsibility for those changes sat. Because one of the things that we'd identified with previous after-action reviews was that the after-action review had been done and the report had been made about these are all the things, and they weren't progressed as well as they could have been. So what I chose to do in this particular case was anyone who offered something that could be fixed, something that wasn't working, something they thought should be improved, fantastic. How? So the how was tied very closely to the what, which is a huge risk in an after-action review, because you can deep dive down a rabbit hole real quick and get stuck on the solution before you properly understand the problem. And we absolutely recognised that, and my facilitator was exceptional and made sure we kept the conversation very much at that high level. And it didn't necessarily have to be the solution that was going to work. But what I wanted the participants to understand was that if you were going to offer a problem or an issue, I wanted you to think about how it could be improved, because it's not someone else's job to make it better. There's always that wonderful, someone will fix that and they'll fix that and, someone will make it wonderful. That someone is us and everyone who's involved in that system. So we worked with what can be improved. We worked with ideas about how it could be improved. They got set aside as our future potential actions list. And we kept people focused on the fact that they have ownership and responsibility of the solution. And that's really powerful, because one of the things that I get feedback on all the time around after-action reviews is why bother, because nothing changes. What's the point if you don't listen to me? So it's very important that we help our members understand that we do listen to them. We do want to action the things that they've identified for us, but they are as much part of that solution as the rest of the collective us. So, taking action. Out of the 6 after-action reviews, I had 438 people participate. We had in-person, we had online, we had hybrid. I had a fantastic team supporting the facilitation of this process. We then sat down with all this wonderful data and went, oh goody. I'm actually really excited about the process that came next. The NRSC team, along with our resource management group team members, have done an analysis of the data that was generated through the after-action review. We've created a report and it went to the Commissioner and Chief Officer Strategic Committee a couple of weeks ago, and they have adopted all 22 recommendations out of that report, which are absolutely focused on making those improvements that our members have indicated will make it easier for them to step into this very complex space. So one of the advantages of having a whole lot of people on my team to now action these 22 recommendations is that I don't have to do it all. It also means that I can help people understand that they have ownership of those solutions. And by sharing the responsibility, it's not just NRSC who is responsible for these solutions. It's agency, it's the coordinating authorities who are developing international briefing guidelines, an international crosswalk document to clarify the equivalency across roles, an international expense claim guide, so that we have standards out there in the international space to support these deployments in the future. A whole lot of other really helpful things, including a digitised resource management system, so that those of us who have to manage, track and report on these very complex deployments aren't doing it on an Excel spreadsheet, which works, but could be better. So these are about taking this feedback, taking this energy that's been generated by these deployments and turning it into action that our members can see, can recognise and take some ownership of. Because until we do that, the frustration of our members around these after action review processes are just going to build, and they're going to stop coming. So team, I just wanted to leave you with a couple of thoughts, the world according to Emma. Our climate is becoming more complex. By the numbers, we can see that these international deployments, even these interstate deployments, are going to become more common, concurrent, complex, and reoccurring. Having the successful systems in place to support these members who do this on top of everything else they do is absolutely critical to ensuring their safety, to ensuring their success, and ensuring the success for the communities that they are going to support. Agencies will always step up to help agencies, because that's what we do. The responsibility of those of us sitting in these positions is to make sure that the systems and processes that support them when they do this are as good as we can make them. We will never make them perfect, and this process will be ongoing, but through these after action reviews tailored for these specific systems, I believe that we can continue to improve these processes and the outcomes for our communities. Thank you very much for your time.
You don't get off that lightly. And congratulations, Emma, a fantastic presentation without your laptop and your notes. Well done. I think we're all impressed.
You don't know what I didn't say.
Perhaps it's better we don't. So we've got a few questions that have come up on the Slido platform, and the most popular one is the lessons management process able to pick up on the emerging risk of international requests starting to overlap with Australia's needs as seasons become longer?
Yes. Yes, so that is a fantastic question, and certainly something that AFAC, the NRSC, COSC have been talking about quite often. We work very closely with our international partners. We have a very good situational awareness of their current circumstances. What that allows us to do is go to the Commissioner and Chief Officer's Strategic Committee, who are the ones who determine whether Australia and New Zealand have the capacity to share those resources, and they get to make the call as to whether or not we go. So in the short term, yes, we're able to adjust. So for example, Australia is not the only capability that goes into the Northern Hemisphere. So Mexico, Chile, South America, Portugal, France, all these countries support Canada and the US. We are just one part of that capability. What we're starting to talk to the US and Canada about now is whether we go earlier in their season as opposed to later. So if our deployments start earlier, end of June, start of July, it means that we're finishing earlier, which means we've got the resources in our home states and territories for our fire season. The other thing that we're working on is the building of capability. So I mentioned about the incident management capability and the need for a global response to this. Canada and the US especially, are advocating for mentee positions. So in their resource requests, where they send one, they send two. And we're talking about the international liaison officers, the senior agency representatives, the incident managers who go across, so that we continue to build this capability through these experiences. They take that building of capability very seriously because of exactly that question. So at some point, we will run out of resources, and we'll just do the best with what we have, as we always do. but there is absolutely work being done to make sure that we are in the best position possible.
Thanks, Emma. And just one more. What metrics have AFAC Operations developed to measure the performance of its systems in place?
Great question. If you've got some for me, that would be fabulous. At the moment, it's very much based on the experience of our people using those systems. So we work very much on, for example, let's take financial reconciliation. It's a process that happens at the end of the deployment. Our members put their expense claims in, we do a reconciliation, we send the bill to Canada and the US, they send us money, hopefully. At the moment, very manual system takes about 5 months. Huge amounts of hours on members, on agencies, on NRSC. So what we're putting in place is a system that's going to shorten that, hopefully, touch wood, Rob, to about a month. And the metric will be, is it easy for our members to use? Is it cost and time effective for our agencies? Does it get us as good or better result in a shorter period of time? As far as the other parts of usage of the system go, at the moment, it's very much member experience. And they tell us quite robustly whether or not they think we're on the right track, which we're very grateful for. But yeah, other than that, it's very much in development.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you for a wonderful presentation. Thank you. We've got some more questions lined up in Slido for you, and the team will get you just to answer those online shortly. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I sat down very humbly and listened to the praise of my chief executive when he was acknowledging my work in lessons management this morning. And the reality is that it's never about one person, it's about a team. And I'm really, really proud to be part of an amazing team in the operational assurance team at Fire and Emergency. And I'd really like to welcome my team members up onto the stage now. Daryl Papish and Callum Penny-Wesh from Fire and Emergency New Zealand to talk about what we do in lessons management.
Tamare te whānau. It's been a pleasure to be up here today, and thanks for that, Des. So, my name's Daryl Papish. I'm the manager for operational assurance. Been in the job, I'll just quick about myself, been in the job way too long, about 43 years now. Started as a volunteer firefighter and have worked my way up to where I am today. So, I'm just wearing 2 hats today, though. I'm normally the manager of operational assurance, but currently I'm just being sidelined to national training. So I'm managing the 3 national training centres and our course delivery for FENS at the moment as well. So I've got a little bit on. And before I hand the roku to Callum, I'd just like to acknowledge the rest of our team. So we've got our rangatira Trevor over there. We've got Ted, or Little Ted as he's known, over there. And of course we've got Des here. And one more acknowledgement I'd like to do right now is Russell Wood from Russell Wood Consultants. And the reason for that is when we developed the framework, Russell was one of the senior leaders in our organisation at the time. He's since moved on, and if it wasn't for Russell, we wouldn't have this framework across the line. So, so we thank you very much for that, Russell. See Russell, he'll have his card there ready later on for any work going forward. Okay, and I'd like to introduce Callum.
Kia ora mai koutou katoa, ko waio. My name is Callum Penny-Wesh. In addition to being a national advisor in our operational assurance team, I've been with Fire and Emergency for 8 years, 3 of those in a paid role and the other 5 as a volunteer. So it's been absolutely awesome to have the ability to come through, bring that lens of volunteerism into the content we'll cover with you today. And just as Des and Daryl have said, just to be part of an amazing operational assurance team. So I'm imagining this green button. Ka pai. So whānau, without further ado, in addition to our operational assurance team role here, just wanting to let you know that the QR code, we've also done a little bit of guerrilla marketing, and the operational assurance pamphlet is on your desks. There will be an opportunity, it will come up at the end of our presentation. We're very keen to hear from you with Slido, in addition to connecting with us online. We've already got 5 new followers from the room today. Kia ora koutou. So what we're going to focus on in this presentation is, like with all things with continuous improvement and lessons management, we want to reflect on the journey we've experienced here with Fire and Emergency New Zealand. And we want to take you through what we've experienced over the past 9 months with our commitment to implementing a lessons management framework, how that looks specific to our organisation of 14,500 paid personnel and volunteers. And we're going to cover that across 3 different pillars. And like all lessons management nerds, we will appreciate it's important to acknowledge continuous improvement and where we've come from, and we're really excited to share with you what our next steps are after this kaupapa we'll cover today. So in the theme of where to from here, Fire and Emergency committed in our strategy 2025 to 2030 to undertaking safer, effective, more resilient operations. So that's some of the content that we'll focus on, and you'll also see our key messages, our key takeaways pop up at the bottom of each slide, but I'll pass over to you now, Daryl. Kia ora. I'm passing back to myself. Yeah. Yeah, we have. If I could just request IT support from our team in the back, my green button doesn't seem to work. But anyway, once more. Yep, no, that is you, Daryl. Yeah.
Gosh, yeah. Okay, so what's enabled us to get to where we are? So we're very fortunate that our DC, who isn't here today, supported us through this whole thing. And what she got put into our into the 24-25 statement of performance was that we will develop a lessons framework by the end of this business year, which just came out rapidly. So having that in there was no way we couldn't deliver it. So all of our senior leaders had to adopt it when we put it in. We had 2 or 3 iterations of it, but we finally got it across the line not that long ago. It also aligned with a couple of our values, so haingatanga and whanangatanga, which is we strive to improve and we are better together. It aligns with our branch charter, which you'll see up there as well. And very recently, our Kerry earlier just produced his new strategic direction. So the ink's still wet on that, so hence it's not in here. But in the strategic direction, it talks about undertaking safe, effective, resilient operations. So that just tied the whole thing together quite nicely this time around. So those things embedded into our organisation, lessons it just had to happen. So, and we've been wanting it for a long time.
Ka pai. So moving in from here, so knowing that that's the strategic and enablement environment that we came from, it's important to reflect now just what it is that we've come from on the journey from continuous improvement. So once the slide pack loads, really just wanting to reflect on the approach that we had previously. While we've had a big focus on after action reviews and auditing our operations to identify opportunities for improvement, we recognise, similar to some of the other themes today, that our methodology didn't always celebrate the wins. And where we did identify opportunities for improvement, we would find that what we would identify in Auckland was not quite well reflected or integrated with what was identified up the road in Northland, or what we would find out of Otago in the deep south. So wanting to reflect that where we came from, we had an approach that generated really good local insights, but those local insights stayed local. They didn't have that regional connection across our 5 different fire regions or across our 17 different districts. So what we wanted to flag as part of our continuous improvement and the development of our lessons management framework was, this is the challenge, this is the current operating environment. So in order to deliver something that's fit for purpose across 14,500 personnel, that's where we were able to then move on and develop our lessons management policy and framework, which Daryl will talk more about.
Okay, so developing a framework. So as like everyone else in this room, we borrowed the AFAC guidelines and books and etc. To develop our framework. And you see we've got some of those around the place as well. There's a whole big pile of them at the back of the room if you want to have a look at that later. Our framework outlines the roles and responsibilities from the person, right, from the firefighter to the senior leaders of our organisation, what their roles will be, how they could contribute, participate in the whole lessons framework. It focuses on learning before, during and after event. In the past, it's always just been after, and it's been an operational review after an event when something didn't go well. And what happens with that is, as you're quite aware, is people stop telling the story because all they think it's going to be a witch hunt. So we've started embedding this from pre-events. It talks about after-action reviews and the different levels. We've introduced various layers of after-action reviews, going from quite task-focused up to strategic or command debrief style. And then we have reviews on top of that. We had to adjust our triggers because our legislation changed in 2017 to represent the new organisation, and our previous legislation was very structure fire focused. In fact, that's all it was. So now under the new Act, we respond to everything. So our mandate is huge, and so we had to change all of the triggers within that. So that took quite a lot of work. And we also produced a whole lot of guiding and supporting tools to align with this to help the end user, like how do I and those sorts of stuff, to go through the process themselves.
So the next part of the presentation that we'd really like to spend a bit of time with you on is our supporting initiatives. So while we've got a framework, a policy of where we've come from, our supporting initiatives, whānau, this is what actually helps to make it real for our people out there. Whether you're a firefighter or an officer that are on the trucks, if you're a surge support staff member in a coordination centre, or you've got a BAU role that has to deal with some of the recommendations that we point out. So before I delve into just some of the specific details over the next few slides, I really do want to, as Daryl said earlier, just acknowledge the thought leadership and the templates and the guidance from a lot of our AFAC partners in the room, specifically our whānau from the New South Wales State Emergency Service. Really want to thank you for your time in July, August of last year, because the SES gave us the architecture for an operational assurance database, and we were able to then take on the framework and the architecture of the SES, appropriately adapt it for a New Zealand audience, a fire and emergency setting, and similarly with other fire rescue agencies across the AFAC jurisdictions, being able to then go, what are we looking for moving forward from a review process? What are we looking for when we need to give guidance to operational staff on a 4-day on, 4-day off shift cycle? What does it look like? Being able to give good guidance, good support to people. If you only go to your fire station on a Monday night from 7 p.m. till 9 p.m. because you're a volunteer, that's training. We had a really big thought piece around what does a supporting initiative look like given the diverse range of our target audiences. So I'd like to first off cover the operational assurance database, and as we interact with you throughout the conference, we're more than happy to give you a test drive of what we've done as well. The one thing that we wanted to be clear on was where we identify lessons or insights that are of note from across the motu, we would love to have a single source of truth for anyone in the organisation to access them. Our operational assurance database is that. The other thing that we want to hone in on is that with our after-action reviews, a lot of good insights for our operational firefighters. For example, to give you something very specific, if you haven't attended a multi-storey structure fire in a while and you're leading a crew of 3 other firefighters and your goal is to not only resolve the incident but keep your people and the public safe, be assured that there's just something there with really good insights to support you in planning your strategy. And what we've done with the operational assurance database as well is we've been able to leverage in our obligations under the Privacy Act 2020 in New Zealand to make sure you access the insights, we protect the data of people affected by incidents to respect their mana and their privacy, and we've been able to make sure that it aligns with our ICT policies at Fire and Emergency as well. So knowing that you've got access to real-time lessons, real-time insights, real-time data that complies with all of the legislation and frameworks just makes it such a fantastic tool. And we plan to, over the next few months, it works in the corporate environment. We'd love to roll it out to the trucks, and we've been given approval to do that. So an absolutely awesome resource for our people. The next part I'd just like to focus on briefly, those resources and tools. It's really good to say as operational assurance that we're delivering a lessons management framework and policy for our people, but we want our firefighters and officers to take ownership of it and really embed it at the station level or at the headquarters level. What better way to do that than give them firm guidance on when we say we're running an after-action review, here is what an after-action review is. If you've never heard of the OIL methodology in a fire and emergency context, here's a quick reference guide on what it means for us. And more importantly, while we've got really good insights that we can share with our people, it's really important that we get good content coming in. So guidance on how to write a really good observation, writing really good insights, undertaking that analysis, is what we've been able to provide to our people as well. Now, I'm mindful that the text is quite small, so for those of us without glasses, if you scan our QR code at the end of the session, I'm more than happy to share our resources. And then the next thing that I really want to focus on as well, so one of my incident management roles, I'm a public information manager or a PIO for our Australian whānau. I really want to hammer home the importance of communicating with impact to our people and demonstrating impact where we've got good use or good uptake of our resources. And the two things I really want to highlight here is the Operational Assurance SharePoint Hub. We got a lot of feedback from our frontline officers, firefighters and people that work in the headquarters environment. I'd love to access your stuff, but I can't find it on the portal. So while we recognise that our internal intranet, it's fantastic because it's our single source of truth. While it might not be the most user-friendly system, we were able to work with our content team to go, well, we've got a lot of tutorials and videos on how to complete elements of one of our other programs, our audit programs. We've got a lot of learnings that we identify from operational reviews. Why don't we create a hub for all things operational assurance? So while we might be after you for lessons today, if we've got insights or anything else from any of our other work programs, how awesome would it be to be able to access things on a single source of truth? And thus the Operational Assurance Hub on SharePoint was born. And then the next item I just want to focus on too is the importance of, it was raised in the keynote session today, the theme of vibrancy. So what we've done with the rebrand or a bit of a refresh on our operational assurance products is with our feeder lines, our continuous improvement case studies, and I'll put a shoehorn in here, Des, they are authored by you, want to reflect, number one, these are already the most interacted item on the portal for our organisation. So out of everything that people access on our intranet, feeder lines are already number one. We received such good feedback once we just did a visual pivot to better identify what a feeder lines case study is. If you see it hanging up on a safety, health and wellbeing notice board on a station, making our products more recognisable, and within the first few seconds of interacting with them, you can see the key takeaway or how we've leveraged the lesson identified or the lesson learned. So really reflecting that we've got the tools, systems, the ways of communicating with impact so that we're able to engage really strongly with our people. And I'll pass over to you, Daryl.
And just carrying on from that hub, it's we've built all this ourselves. Fire and Emergency owns all these platforms. It hasn't cost 1 cent. Callum and I have walked the country, flashing our eyelids and our eyelashes, sweet talked everyone, and they've just come to the party, man. Like honestly, we haven't, not 1 cent has been spent on anything we've developed on that screen, and it's pretty impressive. So we just like to. There's a bit of a we've got some key people in ICT. They've adopted that into the BAU now, so they've taken it on board to support it. We're one of the few SharePoint sites that they've done that. We've got tech writers, we've got all these people on board. We make them look good, and so they develop this really cool product. So we're quite flattered in how people have come to our aid during all this. But going on a bit further than that, so we also have, you've still got to get the word out there, don't you? You can't just have a flash dashboard and all this sort of stuff. So we also have lessons champions. So in the operational review space, we use operational firefighters and officers to come on board within the teams to do the operational reviews. I'll lead it, or we'll lead it, but we bring in these guys and girls do it every day. They understand this stuff, so we bring them on board. So what we've done is we've identified a list of about, I'm thinking up to about 23 of these people, which are the commanders and senior station officers, which is the highest operational rank on the trucks. And they are our operational, those are our lesson champions. So we've engaged with them, and they're going to be the first port of call for anything that we send out, and they're going to be our eyes and ears out there to bring stuff back in. So that's working really well. And they also raised the profile of lessons management in their local area. So and it's already started to flow. Like after action reviews, they've just come in like tenfold. We provide the templates for it. We've got various levels of them. They come into us in various forms and formats and spelling and grammar and all that sort of stuff. So we then go through the process of, redaction, all that sort of stuff before we actually put them online. But we got a lot of uptake there. And we're also, they are also the first port of call for anything out there lessons. So, so we'll put that list out. It's actually on our hub actually. So all those people are out there, and but we have yet to do our, which we'll talk about in a second, our soft launch to identify all these people.
So team, we've taken you on a bit of a journey and we've focused quite a lot on just lessons management, there we go, and lessons management and continuous improvement on its own. But for us, the proof is in really how do we embed and integrate these two things across fire and emergencies business as usual. And just wanting to reflect that some of the work that we've done to date is about not only, we can say we've identified a lesson, we've learned a lesson, but when the next emergency comes around, did we really? So really wanting to reflect how does BAU integration with lessons management and continuous improvement at FENS, what does that look like? So just working our way across the screen, operational reviews, as Daryl said earlier. So when we look at a significant, an unusual or an incident of note, we now originally the team, so while we leverage subject matter experts, firefighters, officers, that type of incident category is their bread and butter. In addition to using the ICAM methodology, we now give our review teams continuous improvement methodology so that they're able to identify through insights lessons that we can identify for fire and emergency in an operational review. So we're starting to see that language, that terminology, those insights start to be promulgated through our reviews. We're also integrating it into, we call it Paeru Mahi, it's our incident leadership competency framework for our commanders and our assistant commanders. When we measure the benefits of our senior incident leaders going through this program, we're now able to showcase and demonstrate through continuous improvement are the benefits of them completing this incident management program reflected in the real world through the resolution of incidents and emergencies by our operational leaders. So we're seeing it reflected in the way that we train our leaders. Also through our emergency management program. So to Emma's presentation earlier with the deployment of firefighters to Canada and the US, now we're able to, in the coordination centre environment, ahead of the next time we stand to support our AFAC and our NRSC colleagues, integrating lessons and continuous improvement to do a before action review. So that way it's not a cold start when you push the button and you need fire and emergency to act as a broker on behalf of other firefighting agencies in New Zealand. We're a little bit quicker to the mark, we're a little bit sharper, we strengthen the way we do our service delivery. So we're really proud to work with the emergency management program. With our communication centres, so where we used to have a greater alarm audit process that I reflected on earlier, there's always opportunities for improvements, but we don't have as strong of a methodology to celebrate the wins. We now have that in place as part of the standard operating procedures for our 3 emergency call taking centres across the Motu. So we're also really chuffed to be able to get that over the line. And that's where we have our simulation exercises, so opportunities to test our capability and capacity in a simulated environment. Just last week we had National Exercise Mai Kuku to test a wildfire response across 2 different local IMTs, scaling up to region and seeing what the national support looks like. We were able to apply the lessons management framework, the data collection principles that we've got in there, myself being an evaluator. By using that framework in real time, we were able to collect the observations from the team. They felt safe to share their honest thoughts, knowing to pick up that point of retribution. There was none of that feeling from our staff in the coordination centre. They felt like they could share their honest perspectives. And from there, as the evaluator, I was able to actually, oh, this is fantastic. I've got 60 bits of data from all of our people in the NCC. How good. I was able to turn that in real time into something I was able to use as a critical friend to our control function to go, this is the sentiment from the shop floor team, keep doing this. You're going to need to strengthen up here and get support here. So we were able to, following the next day's operations, keep that high level tempo and keep delivering as part of the National CIMEX. So didn't anticipate to do that. I thought I was just evaluating with a checklist. But the fact is the framework was so useful, we were able to provide benefits in real time ahead of the after action review process. So no, that's pretty cool stuff, Over to you, Daryl.
Over. Okay, so where are we from here? So we've done pretty good here. We haven't even launched it yet, to be honest. So so we've got a lot of stuff planned. So we've got firstly we're going to actually launch. Then we've got a soft launch. We've got a whole communications plan, a whole launch plan about to go out, and we're going to start rolling this out. We're going to monitor and just keep monitoring the whole thing, see how it's working. Is it working for our people? What tweaks and that do we need to make? So this is only the beta version, so we've got a lot of work to do to update it. We're going to enable other branches to utilise our tools. So, for instance, I had my training hat on the other day at the training centre. We had legal happen to be sitting in the room, and I was presenting this, or similar this, to our officer group going through it, and they loved it. They thought, man, we could use this. You know, if someone inquired with legal about how to interpret this piece of legislation, if it goes in here, and Officer X is out in the fireground, they could put it up as a lesson. Oh, that's how you interpret that. That's how I can apply this piece of legislation to this event. So I think it's going to go gangbusters across the whole organisation. We will expand and along with that, is expanding our network of lessons champions through the other branches and directorates within the organisation. Currently, it's very operational focused. This is our testing ground. Once it's up and running, we'll then push it out across the whole organisation. I will continue to share insights and experiences with our stakeholders, our partner agencies and stuff like that. Other little bits that there's about to do as well, we're about to introduce podcasting. So I don't know anything about podcasting. I don't even know we host one. But anyway, we're going down the podcasting route. So we're going to get the gear for that. And so if an event happens and a lesson comes out or whatever, we're going to go and introduce have a chat to Officer X and talk to them about that event and podcast it across our network. And we're also going to, once again, the advantage of having my training hat on is I hit up our training team. We've got quite a big simulation team, but it's quite big, full on. And I've managed to talk them into doing digital case studies. So we'll be able to pull out our lessons out of here or the review of the AAR, and then they'll, using the simulation process, they'll create some digital case studies, which will be hosted on our hub, and it'll go online, and the lessons will come out of that as they go through it. So that's just some of the stuff we're doing at the moment. Yeah, that's it really. Kia ora.
Thanks, team.
You can answer the questions, please.
Yeah. Oh, no. You got to stand up the front. You get to answer the questions. So, how did you get your existing data ready for setting up the operational assurance database? How do you ensure the data input stays consistent and usable?
Well, I'm going to hand that over to our IT guy.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So all of the information that we've had before, I think it's important that the information was captured as part of that methodology that was in use at the time. So we quite simply, we recognise heritage inputs as heritage inputs because they were identified at the time. But with the operational assurance database, which now applies the OIL methodology, we're pretty clear on how we can put those heritage inputs, which is the same thing, really, just the insights. So we're able to extract the insights from the data, note they came from a heritage environment, and then using the new methodology going forward. And just to possibly get ahead of a question, what is it kept in? It's not just in Excel. We leverage a smart SharePoint list that has a significant amount of automation in it, so it's able to pinpoint what's come in, where it's come from, and what the environment is.
Thanks, Callum. And that leads into the next question. Do you use a software platform to record and measure successful outcomes? How do you track and record observations that turn into a successful outcome?
Absolutely. So in terms of data inputs specifically, there are a few different ways. There's a good old-fashioned QR code. We love a QR code for a mobile input. But what we've done in terms of that is if you use a QR code, we recognise that it's likely come from a mobile device. And the measurement, or not the measurement, but the categorization we use in the background is if you're submitting an observation and you're on a mobile device, you're likely going to want to submit something quickly. So we've just put on, would you like to submit a quick observation or a detailed one? And from there, we're able to recognise, based on what the input is this a quick observation from a mobile device? Yes, fantastic, data label number one. Where it comes to some of the other items that come in, so if you use our operational assurance database and you submit an observation that way, the system will say, oh, a new entry has been made by the operational assurance database, and we'll get a summary at the end of the business day rather than as they come in, or else emails will go to absolute haywire. And then similarly, if you've, in a coordination centre environment, clicked on the Microsoft form just from your desktop, we'll be able to track that because you will have used the coordination centre input. So really long way of saying it depends on the way that you've clicked on the form, whether it's mobile, whether you're in a coordination centre or through the database, it'll tell us how you've done the thing.
Thanks very much, gentlemen. Callum and Daryl from the Fire and Emergency Operational Assurance team, the team that makes me look good every day. So thank you very much.